Welcome everyone to episode 3 of Retroactivity. Awkward silence for effect. That's good.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Today we're going to take a deep dive into the world of Dark Souls.
Prepare to drown.
Yes. What a mood.
Prepare to fry.
Returning to the show is the one and only bathroom tile Scottish boy, Ben McCleary. Hi, Ben.
Wherever he is.
Bathroom tiles is your fault.
It's not my
mine.
fault. Okay, I'm just gonna blame Charles. If that's okay.
Your podcast, everything's your fault.
Wow.
Tell me I'm wrong.
Tell me I'm wrong. That's fair, but I'm not Pixely and you are, so saying maybe you shouldn't live 5,000 miles away.
That's true. That is your fault.
Yeah. Except that it wasn't Pixely when we did it with Holmick, so.
Look, I like healthcare. So.
Oh.
The deepest lore.
You just twist that dagger a little deeper, why don't you? So speaking of Charles, joining Ben and I today is a very good friend of mine who's been on stream with me before, mainly for Dark Souls stuff. We have Charles.
How's it going?
Yeah, he on the internet he goes by Chadkins, but I can't call him that because I've known him too long and I just call him Charles. So
yeah, it's really weird because we're kind of semi-childhood friends, so that's strange.
Yeah, he's one of the few people that actually understands content creation that actually lives around me. It's bizarre.
Yeah,
like I'm the internet content creation like there's a little bubble here because I mean, you know as much as anybody, Charles. This town is fairly uncultured.
Yeah, no, Jacob will succeed at things, and I'll be happy for him.
Well, that makes you unique compared to everyone else in this town too. You'll actually be happy for me.
There you go.
Wow, just all the pain and suffering.
Ironically named place.
Yeah, it really is. So before we dive in, I have to ask Charles. Rather than just having me say he good at Soul Game, in 100 words or less, why are you such a fan of this series?
Thank you for this question.
My pleasure.
It tells a story. It tells a properly situated story of what it means to be human that exists properly not only within its medium but in its time period.
You know, I have to say that was a really good answer, and your internet roboting you a little bit there as you were talking about the meaning of being human was beautifully ironic. Thank you so much, Discord, for making that so perfect.
I understand what it means to be human in the future.
That was beautiful. It was beautiful. Thank you, Discord, for making the jokes that I never could. It means the world to me. Okay, so if you haven't figured it out, we're gonna be talking about Dark Souls, but not just Dark Souls. We're gonna be talking about Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3, and the game that started Dark Souls, which is Demon Souls. Which is the one we will be starting with. Now, that said, some of you are probably thinking, Jacob, are you going to talk about Sekiro, however it's pronounced, Bloodborne, and Salt and Sanctuary, and all those other games that are like Dark Souls inspired? And the answer to that is no. We're not.
No.
We're saving them for a separate episode at a much later date.
Yeah, we'll be going into how Salt and Sanctuary compares to the Dark Souls story, and how it connects, and how Miyazaki actually made that game much later on in development.
Yeah. And it will be with Bloodborne and Sekiro, however people want to pronounce it. I've heard it both ways so many times that it's melted my brain to the point that
the correct way to pronounce it is Sekiro. Shadows Die Twice.
God, it just reminds me when it won an award and they announced that it had won an award, and like it felt like such like the people announcing it just had such a hard time with it.
Sekiro.
Sekiro. Oh, hey, look, Ben died for a second.
Yeah, I know. God, what is camera focus?
Only you could focus your camera and it actually glimpses into hell.
I mean,
Oh God.
it's where I live.
Hey, now Scotland isn't that bad.
And you're an all-star.
Ugh.
Jesus.
Get your game on.
We're off to a rip-roaring start.
Mm-hmm. Ben's
I'm just
camera's
waiting, boy.
exploding, and Charles has
We
every
got
color in the
Beth and
rainbow
Kel.
on his camera, and I'm just sitting here with a green screen
I
behind
know.
me.
I like how I have white and a bit of blue, and then we've got rainbow, and then we just have Jacob.
Yeah, blue plaid as fucking usual. Which shouldn't surprise anybody. So we're gonna start with the game that started it all, which is Demon Souls. A lot of people have not played this one. I would say out of all three of the Souls games plus Demon Souls, it is the one that is overlooked the most. It is also, to my knowledge, a PS3 exclusive.
Yes.
Whereas
for
all
long.
the Souls, all the Souls games are on PC and various systems. I mean, Dark Souls 1 got a remaster, which and Dark Souls 2 got a Scholar of the First Sin bullshit, and Dark Souls 3 exists. We'll get there.
I didn't actually know that Demon Souls was a PS3 exclusive.
Yeah.
The
Yep.
more you know.
Yeah, not for long though,
Hard to
as
read.
Charles said.
Yeah.
Because
not for long.
it's
Now
gonna
it'll
be,
be a PS5 exclusive.
Ooh! Can't wait for
Yay!
more console
I'll never be able to
exclusivity.
play it.
Until the inevitable PC release, because they realize what poor business practice that is.
Yeah, we'll get like the Souls series anthology on PC as soon as the
Probably.
yeah.
Can't wait. Dark Souls
Lord
4,
of
let's
Similar
go.
Collection.
We go. $40! $40! Oh.
That's pretty conservative. Aim for 60.
No, it's when the remaster for Dark Souls came out. We're a little off topic here, but when the remaster for Dark Souls came out on PC, all it was just a re-release of the one that came before, but with DS fix in it.
But they let invaders use Estus, and the fire looked better.
Yeah. So they charged you a shitload extra money for basically the same game you'd already purchased, and then you couldn't buy the original one anymore, I believe.
Oh yeah. I wonder if did they never change that? I forgot. I completely forgot about that.
I don't remember. I just know that it like disappeared, and you could only buy the newer version.
That was true. Yeah, I remember that.
It was super shitty.
I hope that's not the case anymore.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't surprise me if it was.
I swear to God, if it is, why?
Apparently, you
Why
still
would they
can't
do
buy
this?
the original. Necro says so.
Oh God,
Yeah,
why? Why would they do that?
Because you could just buy it and it's cheaper and put DS Fix on it. It's the same fucking thing, and DS Fix is free because, as far as I'm aware, it was a fan patch, not an official one. Is that right?
Yes.
Yep. There you go.
It was a very good fan patch too.
Yep.
God damn.
And that's a conversation for a whole nother day. But the fact that so many games on PC just don't work right, and the devs don't care because they'll just expect fans to patch it out for them, and that frustrates me to no end.
You were like, let's talk about Demon Souls, and we immediately started talking about Dark Souls.
Yeah, I know, right? It's hard to not do that because,
Which
like,
you know is ironic because that's kind of how everyone is, unfortunately.
True.
yeah. All right, well, we'll actually talk about Demon Souls, and
Souls.
the first thing I want to talk about is proof of concept. And what I mean by that is this was the first one. This was where they started. This was their experiment, their first foray into Dark Souls, even though it wasn't Dark Souls at the time.
The Souls formula.
Exactly, the Souls formula. So as a proof of concept, we obviously know that to a degree it worked since we got more games after. But at its core, not comparing it to the other Dark Souls games, did it work?
Yeah, this would actually be a great time because we would be remiss to do a podcast talking about the Souls series without talking about Miyazaki, because Hidetaka Miyazaki is the reason why the Souls series exists in the form that it does. Almost nothing about the core concept of the game would have ever existed without Miyazaki's vision. And the thing about Miyazaki is his story is very important to understanding Dark Souls conceptually, mechanically, from a story perspective, pretty much in whole. And so Miyazaki himself was an IT guy that was working at Oracle in Japan for quite a long time. Wasn't really interested in video game development. Not really a gamer necessarily. A bit of a geeky guy, but he had pretty much left most of his gaming life behind in college. This was until he met a friend of his from college who he caught up with, played some video games with. The video game that actually inspired him to become a video game developer was Eco, which was a game about a boy that that leads a small girl away from a shadow demon thing.
Fantastic.
And yeah, wonderful game made by the same guys that made Shadow of the Colossus. And that game single-handedly inspired him to realize this vision that he had. And this vision was based upon his experience as a young child. He was very poor, and he would go to the library to read books. And his favorite books to read were Western fantasies that were oftentimes only written in English. And he would be unable to read them in full context because he was a child. His English comprehension was not fully developed, and he would have to fill in the blanks, sometimes going paragraphs after paragraphs, not understanding anything that's going on, pretty much just making his own story as he went along. And he found this to be a very fun and meaningful experience. And it was after playing Eco that he had this desire to become a video game developer. And he ended up working at From Software, which at the time was a very small studio, known for the Kingsfield, but more prominently the Armored Core series. They were sort of the mech game development company in Japan at the time. And there was a medieval fantasy that they were working on called Demon Souls. Maybe not. I'm not actually sure about that one, but they were working on a medieval fantasy RPG, and the development was extremely troubled. Nobody wanted to touch the game. It was a bit of a cold product as far as everyone was concerned. They pretty much considered it a failure already. And in this, Miyazaki, who had been hired at From Software just as a jobber, a coder, for the Armored Core series, saw potential in getting to realize this vision that he had had his entire life. Or I guess not his entire life, but since he had played Eco. And he begged and pleaded and negotiated, and eventually was brought on as the director of the game. Took pretty much everything about the game, scrapped it, started instantiating his own vision into it. And long story short, we ended up getting what became the experience of Demon Souls. And it's very important to understand that, because Dark Souls gets a lot of the credit for what Demon Souls instantiated, just because it was much more popular than Demon Souls. And it's easy to think, perhaps, that Dark Souls being the one that everyone remembers is a good argument as to why it did what Demon Souls was trying to do better. In my mind, Demon Souls is the most Souls-like of any game in the series, because in the development of Demon Souls, it was by far considered to be a failure. Nobody gave a shit about it at all. They were just like, pretty much once Miyazaki was on it, they were just like, do what you can with it. We have no idea what to do with it. And through Miyazaki's passion, he was able to turn it into something that was quite quality. The thing is, it really didn't get that much attention. They had it out on showroom floors where people were having experiences with it that didn't seem particularly into it at all. And what ended up happening was that Demon Souls only sold about 20,000 copies in the first week, which
Damn.
for an indie development studio might not be so bad, but for a large, not necessarily independent, but definite, and not necessarily AAA, pretty large gaming development company, kind of a failure.
Yeah.
And so it was sort of considered to be a failure, and then in the end, even when it came out, again considered to be a failure. And it didn't sell well enough. Sony didn't choose to at beginning distribute it worldwide. The game only became sort of a sleeper hit purely by word of mouth. And so the reason, to answer your question of why the Demon Souls core concept works, is because Miyazaki developed it to be sort of archetypal to the experience of what video game players actually enjoy. He took what he considered to be what everyone likes about video games, and he tried to develop a game that was about that. And the reason why Demon Souls is such a I mean, it's also important to talk about the marketplace that Demon Souls existed within when it came out, because when it came out, we were sort of stuck in the rut of AAA companies developing nothing but, and this is nothing against people that like these kind of games, but we were getting nothing but first-person military shooters
Like
Yeah.
gray
that were
and brown
very
characters.
Yeah.
they were
yeah.
very focused on railroading the player through the experience, holding their hand through everything. The stories were very action oriented. There wasn't too much. There wasn't a lot that was deep about them mechanically, story wise, character wise.
They were
They were
safe.
sort of
Yeah.
they were business. They were products of a business that was making products.
Mhm.
And with Miyazaki, it's like this is a guy who is extremely passionate about what he's doing, and his vision for what he wanted to do was he wanted to make a video game that was essentially for people who play video games, and which is the exact opposite of what a lot of those AAA companies were doing, which was just trying to make things that anybody could pick up and pull them in and try to make them play. And I think that what is really at the core of the Demon Souls experience, and sort of what I think makes it the most Souls-like of any game in the series, is that this trying to find the right word. It's this dedication to ensuring that every single thing that you do in Demon Souls means something meaningful to the player, which is not something that is necessarily done by other games. Take mobile games, for example. What mobile games are designed to do is to basically addict you to their gameplay loop and then have you do that repeatedly.
Right.
It's not really the focus of the video game is not for you to have a good time as much as it is for you to keep playing the video
Yeah.
game.
Right.
And so the mechanics of the video game are designed to play on your addictive dopaminergic receptors and keep you going through it.
Right.
Demon Souls is the exact opposite. It's more of a serotonergic game, if anything. It's every single thing that you do is set up so that when you accomplish it, you feel a genuine feeling of accomplishment. And everything from the gameplay mechanics, the story, the characters, every aspect of the game is designed in that to that end, which is what made it the sleeper hit that it was. Because even though it didn't sell like hardly anything, nobody was interested in it at first, the people that soldiered through the experience and decided that they were going to play through it, even though it was so inhospitable, especially to players at the time, realized how wonderful of an experience it was, and it just inevitably grew its popularity from there. And it speaks to why the core concept of Demon Souls worked, is that exactly what you would think happened if you have the intention of giving people a meaningful experience did happen. Because the sacrifice that you have to make a meaningful experience is you have to adopt a lot of responsibility. That's the truth in anything in life. And with Demon Souls, you have to adopt a lot of responsibility for your actions, for what goes on, to get through the frustration of trying to learn how to play the game. But then once you do, you feel genuinely rewarded because the mechanics are fair. Everything that you get feels genuinely rewarding. That's the essence of meaning. And so therefore, no matter how many people actually bought it, as long as one person played through it and enjoyed it, it was going to grow from there. So yeah, I think that's the best argument that I have for why it definitely worked.
A very sound.
That's
one, that.
interesting. We actually have an important question from chat, and that is, what the hell are you laying on? Is it a bed, a couch, or a futon?
I'm laying on a futon
Nice.
and like 2 pillows and this jacket that I was wearing because I was cold, but then I got hot.
Nice. I feel like it's important to note as well that I like to think another reason that Demon Souls is so good is because, fun fact, the English translation of the game after it was localized due to its medieval European setting, most of the actors are actually Scottish for the voice acting. So there you go.
Really?
There's a fun fact for yeah. A lot of the voice actors are actually Scottish voice actors, and they used a lot of Scottish and English voice actors because they wanted to hone in on the idea of the kind of medieval European setting.
You know, now that I think about it, I think that's probably the most notable part of my Demon Souls experience was just having all those Scottish people talking
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah.
I
It's-
can
it's
tell you
hard
after
to
years
scale.
of it, having Scottish people talk to you a lot is not a good thing. So
To the cell, wee man.
That's what makes the world so bleak, is that you have to listen to Scottish people talk the whole time.
It's the service that we play. We anchor the world in reality. We remind everyone that life is truly abysmal.
Hail Boudica.
That was good. Now, one thing before we dive a little more into Demon Souls about the game itself, rather than like the concept behind its creation, all three of us,
Mhm.
out of the 4 games we're going to be talking about today, what's our favorite? And I'm gonna start with Ben. Out of all 4
Okay.
games, which one?
It's gonna be Dark Souls 1 for the main reason of it's the only one of the 4 that I've played in its entirety, from beginning to end, and actually completed and enjoyed and got the experience of playing. And also, from what I have played of, I've played a little bit of Demon Souls and I played a little bit of 3. From everything I have played, unfortunately, I've not played all of Demon Souls. 1 is the one that I have enjoyed the most as well. Although I will say that diving into the lore as I have in preparation for this, I get the feeling I'm about to be sucked into a rabbit hole that I'm not going to get out of for a while.
It's very accurate.
That's the goal. If I can't do that today, man, I failed.
And what about you, Charles? Which one's your favorite?
So, originally my favorite was Dark Souls, and it's definitely by far the one that I have the most experience with and that held the most meaning to me. But after having played Demon Souls once and reflecting on it, and I'd also say I want to give a shout out to a guy on YouTube. I think his name is Aster Aesthetics, who, thank God, somebody finally went back and decided to really analyze Demon Souls in depth. I think I owe a lot to his videos on it, making me reflect a lot about my Demon Souls experience, because there's something about Demon Souls that I think is much more true to the Souls formula than any other game that Miyazaki has made since then. And I would have to say, even though I only played it once, I haven't explored it that much, I think it might be my favorite, because there's something about it that every time that I think about it, it just it pops out to me, and I hope that I can sort of get there with this podcast and to understand why I feel like that. But yeah, it's like no matter how much I love Dark Souls, and I think it's one of the best experiences I've ever played, one playthrough of Demon Souls, I really feel like it's a more special experience.
Wow,
Yeah.
That's an interesting choice. Not a common one. Most people do go for Dark Souls
Nope.
1.
Yeah,
Myself
I'm probably gonna make
included.
a lot of people pissed off with that.
And yeah, like with Ben, Dark Souls 1 tends to be the popular one. In fact, it has been called the flawed masterpiece many a time. And I have to agree with Ben. I think the Dark Souls 1 is my favorite. It was my first Souls game. I will say I have played more Dark Souls 2 than I have of Dark Souls 1. And I'll get into why in a bit. Yeah, I know. And there's a reason. We'll get there. It's not because I wanted to. It's because I had to. We'll get there, okay? But Dark Souls, but Dark Souls 1 is my favorite for a lot of reasons that, of course, we'll get to when we get to Dark Souls. But first, we have to get through Demon Souls. So, asking purely from a game point, here's my next question: what worked in Demon Souls that would appear in later games, or even so much as be made better? It's like, what was there, what was laid as a foundation that they figured, hey, this is good. When we make the next game, Dark Souls, we should put it in that as well. Or even, hey, we can make this even better and put it in our next game.
So it's really difficult to talk about what was good about Demon Souls that they kept. It's a lot easier to talk about what they removed.
We'll get there.
But there's it's true. There's so much about Demon Souls that was just carried over to Dark Souls. That's a really difficult question. I would say that I mean, the core concept of narrative is still there, and I think that the fact that they kept that and that everything else that they changed sort of turned Dark Souls into its own experience. I think that that's sort of what made Dark Souls the massive hit that it was that it did sort of its own gameplay thing that I think was a lot more accessible to people than what Demon Souls was, while still keeping that extremely uh I mean, we could talk about the way that story works
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
in those games forever,
Mm-hmm.
but just the fact that you can go through the entire game not knowing anything about what's going on, and then you get to it, and then you're like, you realize, I don't know what just happened, and then you get interested. It's like that to me is like that's what made it stand out amidst the sea of the samey AAA games, is that you nothing about the story was given to you. You had to be interested in it to get it. And that was so genius. And I think definitely is one, probably if not the main thing, then one of the main things that made the game so popular.
You know, I think
Um,
it's funny you mentioned that about how like you have to be invested into the story, but it doesn't give it to you.
mhm,
It just makes me think of like trying to think like how to properly word this. You have a game and it has an incredible story, and you experience that story and it's great. But when the story is optional, but the game is still fun without the story,
mhm,
that's really important because it doesn't not only not give you the story, it doesn't make you feel bad if you miss it, because the game itself
mhm,
is still fun and rewarding. It doesn't suffer from that syndrome of, oh well, if you don't know what's going on at this point in the game, then the whole game's just not gonna make any sense to you. Like, you could
mhm,
still have fun with it. You can't really do that with, like, I'm just use Persona as an example. Like Persona 5, I've been playing through that recently, and if you're not like up on the story, the game is still fun to play, but there's just so much of the game
mhm.
that if you aren't paying attention to the story, so much of the game falls apart and just really isn't,
Yeah,
like, you don't play that and ignore the story,
yeah,
because it's so story focused. But
yeah, and
you
that's
have,
sort of
go ahead,
sorry,
go ahead.
go on. That's sort of the issue with with the games that the Souls series came out into. Rather, the culture of making video games was the focus of AAA companies was so heavily on making a cinematic experience,
Hmm.
because nobody was trying to make something special with video games. They were just trying to do something special that they already understood with movies, and then just trying to gerrymander that into a video game experience and hoping that people would catch on to that.
Yeah.
And that is sort of responsible for the overly safe business practices. Is just the complete misunderstanding that what you're working with is a medium that at its core is meant to be interactive, and that the most important part of it is its interactivity,
Mm.
and taking the agency away from the player constantly so that they can feel like they're watching a movie is like,
So
I
yeah,
mean,
that's two things. Two things. Just to briefly jump back to the question. One about the things that they kept from Demon Souls to Dark Souls. Is that one, you got to remember that, like, obviously Demon Souls was essentially the creation of a game genre at that point.
mhm,
So
yes,
there's going to be a million similarities between Demon Souls and Dark Souls, because that's where the kind of genre began. And then
mhm,
hopping back on the train of what you're talking about, I could not agree more with the idea of video games as a medium being explored more. Things like Demon Souls and Dark Souls, it's so important, and there's so many games that miss that mark. And I think a very good example of that, and to draw it back to a previous podcast, we actually briefly spoke about this, something like this in the Halo podcast, of a big thing, and it's a pet peeve of mine, is quick time events. The
mhm,
idea of, like, there was this weird regression during that period of
yeah,
like taking the agency away, and then the idea that the game industry was like, oh well, we'll give that agency back to the player and let them control it through quick time events, completely
yeah,
missed the mark, and it was like 10 steps backwards and 2
Yep.
steps forward.
Yep.
yeah,
Agree.
Um, Whereas you have a game like Demon Souls and games like Dark Souls, who literally everything is in your control. What you learn about the world and the obstacles you overcome and the story you experience is entirely influenced by what you as a player do and
Yeah.
physically act in the game. And that level of interaction and the kind of depth that it takes you on into experiencing the world and the story and the perception of you through the character is really it's kind of the peak of what video games can be as
Mhm.
an and both as a storytelling medium and an entertainment medium that was regressed quite ridiculously.
Mm.
Like it,
Yeah.
it shouldn't be a cutscene that you sit and watch and then it takes away the potential there is so much more.
Yeah.
And the Souls like formula that was created in Demon Souls and carried through the series is something that is the perfect example of how you can use that to not only enrich a world but a player's experience with your entire series.
Yeah.
And the lore of Demon Souls is also of Dark Souls is something that is talked about a lot, but I think that something that should really be talked about more is the plot. Because, you know, if the lore is the backstory of the world, the plot is what you're actually doing when you're in the game itself. And it's like I think there's just as much that you can say about every single moment, every single encounter that you have with an area or an enemy in the Souls games as there is that you could say about the backstory of the world. There's so many. It's a completely different area because one is more narrative and aesthetic and creative, and one is more based on the actual mechanics and the development. But
Yeah.
I mean, my God, every single area of both, I would say both Demon Souls and Dark Souls, every single time that I encountered anything, it was interesting. There was
Yeah.
something different. There was something unique. I felt tense. I felt, and there's actually because the question that you asked was like what worked that they carried over and what didn't work. This is actually something else. If I can transition into this,
Go for it.
this is something that I think there is an argument that I think is far too reconciled about whether or not the grass system was better than the Estus system. And I think that as far as the games themselves are concerned, if you put the grass system in Dark Souls or if you put the Estus system in Demon Souls, it would break the game completely. Because the way that the healing system works in both games plays to the strengths of both games. Demon Souls is a game where you have 5 areas. You can go to each one of them, and they're all straight paths. Dark Souls is a game where the entire game is one run through an entire area with checkpoints dotted along everywhere. The Estus system was introduced so that they could have that entire connected world and have the player, you know, go through pretty much half the game without the ability to say warp through bonfires, having to walk from place to place, so that they could design each area around a consistent healing system. Now, the grass system in Demon Souls, I think, is by far the more interesting
Now,
because
before you go on, a lot of people are probably haven't played Demon
Yeah.
Souls. So we know how the Estus system works. It refills whenever you rest at a bonfire, but that also respawns enemies. But it also acts
Right.
as a checkpoint. If you die, you respawn at that bonfire, albeit without any souls you had collected before you catch them in by leveling up or buying items. But how does the grass system work?
So the grass system in Demon Souls the grass system in Demon Souls works exactly the same way that the blood vial system works in Bloodborne. It's a little different because I don't remember there being a vendor in the right, okay. There is a vendor in the sort of hub world that you can use to buy grass, but there's different types of grass. You
Okay.
can get very weak healing grass, the crescent moon grass, or you can get very highly healing grass, like the late moon grass, the new moon grass, things like that. Now, the thing about that is, there's an area in Demon Souls called the Tower of Latria.
Okay.
The Tower of Latria is one of the most terrifying video game experiences that I have ever had in a game that is not considered to be survival horror. Now, the Tower of Latria is an area that has been sort of attempted to be redesigned in later games. I think they tried doing the Tower of Latria in the Duke's Archives in Dark Souls 1. I think something was similar. I can't remember. There was one in Dark Souls 3. I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but they continuously tried to make the areas of later Souls games as scary. Bloodborne, in a way, is kind of one giant Tower of Latria, in a way. And I think they actually worked, and this is why. So, because you have a consistent healing system in Dark Souls, you always know exactly how much Estus that you have, and you have the comfort of knowledge that as you're going through any particular area, it's going to be designed around you probably having the least amount of Estus possible. So even if you have 5, you can still be confident as long as you're going through the area well, you'll probably still survive it. But in Demon Souls, you have resource management. Now, let me talk about resource management for a second and how it relates to survival horror games. Because every single great survival horror game that has ever existed, Resident Evil, Silent Hill, all of them have resource management as a core mechanic. It's clunky and weird, but it accentuates the horror aspect of it, knowing that you don't really know at what time you might actually not have enough of a particular resource to get through an area. What's wonderful about dying in Demon Souls is that you just lost however many items that you used to get through that area. And you don't know if you're going to be able to make it through all of the way at all, anytime that you're playing. And what made the Tower of Latria so oppressive and horrifying was the natural terror that the world was. Miyazaki said himself that the Tower of Latria was supposed to be the Demon Souls representation of man-made evil. And so it's a very dark and grim and terrible and horrifying place to go through. That at the same time as being gruesome and terrible from a gameplay perspective, but that is at the same time as the fact that you really are not sure if you're going to be able to get through this area. It's labyrinthine. It has enemies that can kill you sometimes in one hit. The enemies themselves are horrifying and grotesque and strike fear into you. It's an experience that I don't think later Souls games have been able to replicate, other than Bloodborne, because of its blood vial system. If you remember, Jacob, when we played the DLC of Bloodborne, and I had my New Game Plus 6 character because, you know, I'd only been able to play Bloodborne on your PS4 that you graciously let me borrow to play while I was on a vacation. The only way that we were going to be able to do that was to play it on like New Game Plus 6, because that was where I was. But it was just as the DLC had come out, and so we were playing it for the first time. And when I got to the Orphan of Cause, who was at the time probably the most difficult boss, simply because it was so mechanically designed to go against all convention and to guess what you're going to do before you're going to do it. Playing that on New Game Plus 6 for the first time with a limited healing system, and when I managed to beat it with literally 0 blood vials left after like hours of fighting the thing, and we wouldn't have been able to go on after that, that was probably the most rewarding experience I've ever had in the entire Souls series. And the reason why is because I didn't know if I was going to be able to keep playing the game. I thought, if this doesn't go well, that's it. Like, we're going to have to make up a whole nother stream just to fight one boss. And then by that time, I'll probably have practiced enough that I'll be able to beat it in like 10 minutes. There was such a feeling of tenseness in that. And that's how I feel about the Demon Souls grass system. And I think that the Estus system is wonderful. It works perfectly for what Dark Souls wanted to do, which was to create an interconnected world. But the grass system in Demon Souls was just so wonderful. And to briefly talk about the other thing that Demon Souls didn't carry over to Dark Souls that Dark Souls did wonderful was the interconnectivity of the world. The map. That was... There are... As much as the Orphan of Cause was an amazing moment, taking the elevator from the Undead Parish down and realizing that Firelink Shrine is there, that is a wonderful moment. That was a moment that I realized Dark Souls was, because it was my first game. That was the moment that I realized I was playing something special. Because I don't think there's any other video game that existed before that played with that kind of level of interconnectivity. And it did that throughout the entire game, even after getting the Lord Vessel. The only time that you actually have to watch a cutscene to go through to any area is the transition from the Sen's Fortress to Anor Londo, and then technically for the Duke's Archives because of the fight with Seath. And I think the Estus system and the interconnectivity of Dark Souls with the grass system and the sort of separated journey of Demon Souls sort of made them their own animals, which I think you don't have to pick between them as far as which is the better game because they are so different just from those fundamental things. I appreciate the Demon Souls experience more simply because I am more of an appreciator of the survival horror aspect of Demon Souls than I am of the sort of combat aspect of the later Souls iterations, and how heavily the Souls iterations leaned on that combat focus.
I think it's really interesting as well that massive kind of not only thematic but mechanical differences there, because I think it'll be very interesting to see what they do with the remake in that case.
Mhm.
Because I'm curious to see if they will revamp and redo the grass system again, or if they
Mhm.
will try and move Demon Souls into an Estus system, and how that will affect the remake and the reception and how the remake plays. Not only that, but in a perfect world, I would love it if they did both. If it was a case of they had the grass system, and then for players who wanted a different experience, perhaps one could argue a more easy experience, you would have the Estes system there, as a more kind of a safety net for players who were more used to the Estes system in the Souls games. But I think it'll be interesting to see, because it's completely it's a different dev team that's doing the remake, right?
Yes,
Yep.
it's the
So
dev team that worked on I can't remember. There was another remake, the Crash Bandicoot. Was it them?
oh, is it?
Vicarious
I think-
Visions.
I'm not sure exactly.
Well,
Don't
I
listen
mean
to
that
me.
would be
I'm
good
not sure
because
I'm
Crash
talking
Bandicoot: The Insane Trilogy is the Dark Souls of platform.
about.
You know,
I have to say though, the I am absolutely against the idea, and I don't think that they would do it, because if they can do it for Bloodborne, they can keep it in Demon Souls. I would be absolutely against the idea of an Estus system in Demon Souls, because um, obviously from what I already said,
Right.
but also because first of all, you'd have to reprogram the game so that you could sit at Archstones, because nobody would want to go through a loading screen just to reload their Estus. It would just be frustrating.
Yeah.
And then if you had a bonfire system like the one with Archstones, it would remove a lot of the tension from the game. And
So they actually did fun. Just to sorry to cut you off there. The company that's doing it, Bluepoint, they're actually the people who did the God of War collection, the Eco and Shadow of the Colossus collection, the Shadow of the Colossus.
that's it, Shadow the
remaster,
Colossus. Yeah.
and they did Titanfall.
Titanfall.
Yeah,
Really?
they did the port of the original game that was released for Windows and Xbox One, apparently.
That's
So
odd.
they did the port of Titanfall as well. So it looks like they've done a lot of collections. They did the Metal Gear Solid HD collection. They did the Eco and Shadow of the Colossus collection.
So they're a
God of War
company that
collection,
does ports.
Drake collection.
Mhm.
Yeah, and they did
Interesting.
the Shadow of the Colossus remake.
It's interesting.
There is one change about the from Demon Souls to Demon Souls Remastered that people have been speculating about, because what a lot of people don't know, well, I mean, a lot of people don't know Demon Souls, but what a lot of people don't know about Demon Souls is that there was actually supposed to be 6 worlds. One of the Archstones is actually broken, and people have been speculating that it might be possible that they would, for the remaster,
Ooh.
realize the 6th world.
God,
That
I
could be
hope so.
cool.
Like, personally, I want them to do absolutely nothing different,
Mhm.
but I would like to see that
Would like-
area.
Yeah.
Only if Miyazaki is not just the
Yeah.
okay man on it, but is
Yeah.
directing
Is
that.
involved.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Because
think
that-
that's the big scary thing, is like having like a remake, especially with something so like that's so intimately tied with the experience of the developer.
Mhm.
It's one thing to remake what was there and update it, but it's an entire other thing to add brand new content and not have the original mind behind it be the one creating.
Yes.
It can lead to that divide, and can lead to that. And this is a totally random like comparison to make, but one thing I've noticed is of all things, in Final Fantasy XIV, the MMO, right now there's a raid series going on based around the Nier series. And while the mind behind Nier, Yoko Taro, is heavily involved in the development, a lot of the actual kind of realization. So a lot of the settings and a lot of the characters are all Yoko Taro, but a lot of the mechanics and a lot of the design of the actual enemies and stuff is all 14 development. And you can very much tell what parts of it are Yoko and what parts of it are not. And I feel like that's a danger you run when you do either crossover stuff like that or you do handing off like that. Is you can end up with that kind of shell shock, that kind of culture shock difference. And it would be interesting that if they do add that sixth world, if they manage to either have Miyazaki on board and making it, or if they don't, how much of a shell shock it will be going to that area and seeing the realized differences.
Yeah, see, that's one of the things that I think is, I don't know if scary is the right word for it, but it's a well-known fact that of the Dark Souls series, Demon Souls is the one that people know the least about on average. It's the one that people have played least. The one that, not as many people have played. Most people play Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3, and they didn't care about Demon Souls. And I worry that mindset of, oh, hey, a lot of people haven't played this. We can kind of change stuff. Nobody's going to really notice. This is going to be a lot of people's first time playing it, so we can kind of change stuff around. I hope that mindset doesn't find its way into the remake, because if you remake a game but you don't really keep anything from the original, what the fuck's the point?
Yeah, and I think that the fact that it is a remaster and that it's being held by the company that made the Shadow of the Colossus remaster,
Yeah.
I forget what Bandai Namco. I don't think that they're going to try to force FromSoft's hand in like having a different developer or not having Miyazaki as at least a consultant. It's like I don't think there's any chance of that happening, because I think that Bandai Namco consider, as well as the rest of FromSoft, consider Miyazaki to be the golden child of the industry right now. As far as like, even if just from a business perspective, it's like, step out of the way for this guy. His vision is clearly working. So
yeah,
now, I think we'll be safe. I would be very excited if the Demon Souls remaster does include the 6th Archstone, because they have found files in the original game for that area that it was going to be developed. So
I wanted to touch on something that someone said in chat 6 minutes ago or so. Illuminaldi said that one of the game series that did interconnected maps before Dark Souls was Metroid, but here's the thing, and I find this interesting. Most of the map interconnectivity and stuff that Metroid did is similar to what Necro said with Jak and Daxter. And what I mean by that is this is really hard to describe without like having charts and shit for me to make. But with like Metroid, you would have a hub area, right? I'm gonna use this pin. You would have this hub area, go over here, and there'd be an elevator. It would go down to this section, right? And you would work your way across this section, and there'd be an elevator, and it would take you back up here. So these places were connected and everything. And Jak and Daxter did that in a different way, in that you would have like a hub area, right? And then there would be this place off of it, and there would be this place off of it, and there would be this place off of it, and this place off of it. And that kind of reminds me a bit of how Demon Souls did it. But the way Dark Souls did it, in my opinion, is the pinnacle of interconnected worlds, and I'll go more into detail of that when we get to Dark Souls 1. But the way that it's connected is less of lines connected to a hub area or elevators connecting different sections, but it's more of a spider web of interconnectivity, and it makes the world feel more real, more organic.
Exactly.
And
that's why
amazing.
That's why I would say that Dark Souls world, the interconnectivity of it is actually a very different animal than that of a Metroidvania, because in the Metroidvania formula, first of all, the game is in 2D, which means that if you're going to create interconnectivity, you can only do it sort of in 4 cardinal directions.
Up, down, left, right.
And that can be fun from a gameplay perspective, and it can sort of lend its own level of realism. But doing that in a 3D perspective is not only much more difficult because you have every direction to work with, but when you pull it off well, it adds a level of realism that breathes so much life into the world and makes you really feel immersed in the experience.
And I think another thing that's really important about that interconnectivity is, especially comparing it to things like Metroidvanias, and So the Metroidvania, the interconnectivity of the map is also very dependent on the progress you've made through the game as well. There's a lot of areas that, while interconnected to areas you've done before, are inaccessible unless you've gotten to a certain point or got a certain item. And while there are some places like that, for the most part, you're kind of just thrown into it with Dark Souls. And
Yeah.
it's very easy to wander off to the wrong place and
Yes.
get completely annihilated because you
Catacombs.
and
Yeah,
you wander to the wrong place, and there's nothing, and it's a case of it is all connected, and it's not like, oh, I need to go get a super key to open this door to get me here. You just walk there, and you go
Yeah.
there, and you realize that it's a bad idea to go there by going there.
Yeah.
And we could use that example, but another great example is just the existence of the master key, which I think is something that I actually missed from later installments. The ability to actually sequence break, but not to the extent that it actually makes the game easier, though it does if you know the game well enough to know what items are where.
Yeah.
But to sequence break so that you end up having a completely different experience.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's like that is something that I started with the master key in my first playthrough, and when I played by myself, and I accidentally ended up in Darkroot Garden early, and I ended up going back, obviously, but it was like it felt so like I felt like I was breaking the world, and then obviously having the encounter with Havel was like having that early, like having the encounter with Havel justified the master key in my mind.
Yeah.
Because it allowed you to it allowed new players to quickly get an extremely important item that is probably the best item in the entire game very early, but it also created a sort of punishment and challenge for people who thought that they could get away with taking the master key and breaking the game. It was sort of like, because that's the first area, unless you go down through New Londo, which you'll probably get out of New Londo as soon as you realize the ghosts are there.
Yeah.
Unless you go down through New Londo, that's probably going to be the first place you use the master key. And the first thing that happens is that you fight a guy that, even if you continuously parry or backstab him, is going to take like 20 backstabs or parries to hit, if not, 100 hits with your stupid dinky sword or whatever you're using. And it's going to tell you really quickly, like, maybe you're not really ready for this. Maybe you save this one for the good players, little Tibby.
That's a big thing as well, is that, like, with Dark Souls, you aren't, I mean, so you're not gated from an area by the fact that, just take Metroid as an example, because I can't open this door because I don't have a super missile. You can go to that area, doesn't mean you're going to be able to beat it.
Yeah.
And there's that certain level of, for the general player, arriving in that area and getting your absolute ass kicked is a good note of, okay, I'm gonna come back here when I'm a bit stronger. But for the players who are ineptly skilled, it doesn't matter, because it means that you can get through that area and it doesn't stop you. It just makes it much harder, and it gives you that extra level of accomplishment and skill for the more skilled player who can get through that harder area without being as prepared as another player might need to be. And it doesn't gate you from what you want to do. It just it's an entirely player, and it's another, coming back to that interaction, it's entirely based on the player and the player's skill level and what the player does. It doesn't matter if you had this item, if you had super melt to go that way. Like you said, you managed to find your way all the way to a horrifying death forest.
Yeah.
And had you decided to, you could have fought your way through there. Not advisable, but you could have if you.
Hey, again, we're talking a bit much about Dark Souls, but to go back to Demon Souls, it's like, once you beat the first area of Boletaria, you can go anywhere in the game.
Yeah.
And you can go to extremely late game areas and extremely punishing areas right away after basically the tutorial. It's like, Demon Souls pretty much allows you, I would say, especially in the case of going to like the Valley of Defilement or the Tower of Latria at the beginning of the game, it basically allows you to go from Undead Burg to the Duke's Archives. It's like that's there is so much agency and freedom in Demon Souls, and Dark Souls did it too to some extent. But God, I feel so strongly that Demon Souls did agency better than any game I've ever played in my entire life.
There's something there that I wanted to touch on. I've got two things. The first one is, when we were talking about Metroid, and how most of that stuff is 2D, but then Dark Souls comes along with the 3D interconnectivity. Metroid Prime was 3D, and it did interconnectivity somewhat well, but it did it just like other Metroid games by the use of elevators connecting areas together rather than the areas just being organically weaved together. Now that's not to say that that Dark Souls didn't use elevators to connect areas, because it absolutely did.
Yes.
But they felt like every time you get in an elevator in a Metroid game, it's like a cutscene. And you feel like, okay, this is a loading zone and I'm moving to the next area. But in Dark Souls, it's not a loading zone. And you just feel like you just happen to be riding an elevator to a new area. And I know that's such a minor thing, that loading zone versus not loading zone, or cutscene loading zone versus non-cutscene loading zone. But it creates such a drastically different feel.
Yes.
And
this is something that this is a technical achievement
Yes.
that we can lend to Dark Souls,
Yes.
in that it used its very long elevators and its very long staircases and putting them into corridors and things to load and unload areas, which not only made the game technically possible, it added that layer of, wow, I feel like I'm just walking around a world.
Yeah.
This exploration is so like
seamless. It's so seamless.
Yeah. That's the word. That's the
And
word.
it's so good for it. Now, the other thing I wanted to touch on was something you mentioned earlier, Charles, in Demon Souls, about how, with the story, it's not shoved in your face, and you can get as much of it or as little of it as you want. And this is something I want to talk about in Dark Souls 1, just because it'd be really hard for me to talk about it with Demon Souls since I barely know that game, is a lot of the story, the backstory of the Souls games, all of them, is items. Items have so much to do with the world.
Oh, yes.
And whether it be you have to look in your inventory and examine the items, or whether it's in like a loading screen where it just, hey, this item, blah, 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 blah. I find that very fascinating. And again, we'll go over that in a minute. But it also means that people that are just there to play the game rather than to experience the story, which there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, play the game how you want. That's the beauty of video games. But that means that people are going to get drastically different experiences compared to other people, depending on how they choose to experience the story, how deep they want to go into the lore, and how slowly they want to explore the game. So you get 2 completely different experiences, or 3 or 4 or 5 different experiences, which is great. But as a live streamer, as a content creator, let me tell you something I can't fucking stand.
Yes.
People that are mad when you don't experience the game the same way that they did. And it happens all the fucking time. And it's why playing games blind can be such a nightmare, especially games like that. You go to a new area, right? And you see an enemy in the distance that looks interesting, and so you go over to see that enemy so you can fight them and see what kind of interesting mechanics that they have, maybe what awesome item they might drop to make you better. And chat gets mad. Why didn't you go to that secret corner over there with that one particular item that tells you something interesting?
Extremely obvious ladder that is right behind him. If you go around and you kill these 3 enemies, you can go up the ladder, you can get an item that's really good and kill that enemy in a really cool way.
Yeah, it's exact, and that's the flip of having a game that is different experiences for different people, is when you go to talk about your experiences with other people, which is a very cool thing to do with games. And is how I got introduced to a lot of games, and how I've introduced a lot of people to other games.
Which is the inspiration for the message system in both games.
Talking about video games and sharing experiences with each other, I don't know what kind of idiots would do that.
Yeah, I know, right? It's not like I made a career on it or anything. But yeah, I do think it's really cool that the games are experienceable in different ways. It's just, it can lead to its own problems. Now, back to Demons. Oh, go ahead.
I actually want to make a point, because you're talking about the items, and this is one of the most beautiful positive feedback loops that Dark Souls and Demon Souls have to offer, and I think Demon Souls again offers it better because of the importance of the items. It's like in many RPGs, even in Dark Souls to some extent, when you pick up an item, it's not really, if it doesn't really pertain to you, then you don't really care.
Yeah,
I had that experience a lot when I was playing Dragon's Dogma, which is kind of a Souls adjacent game that I would recommend to people that are fans of Souls. It's very good in its own way, but it has a lot of its own problems. But in Dragon's Dogma, you don't really have the importance of the story And so every time I would pick up an item that wasn't a part of my class, or it wasn't a part of my strategies, or it wasn't going to be useful to me, it was just like it just sat in my inventory and I didn't do anything with it, and it just became a bunch of clutter in my storage. It's like, that sucks. But what's beautiful about the Souls games is not just that the items have worth, even if you aren't using them practically as utilities. It's the fact that the items have worth no matter what you're doing, encourages you to get them, which encourages you to explore, which is one of the main facets of the Souls experience, is exploration. And so if you're walking through an exploration game and you don't feel like exploring because you don't feel like anything interesting is going to happen, you don't even end up experiencing the game. I had that experience so much in Assassin's Creed. That I understand a lot of people like that game, but I really dislike the gameplay loop of Assassin's Creed, because the only reason to explore from a practical perspective is to collect things for an achievement, pretty much. They don't have any use. It's just like you found the chest in a corridor in a samey environment of this Roman looking town.
What are you saying? You don't want to go get a bunch of flags hidden on the rooftops that do literally fucking nothing?
I played the first,
and 2 make me want to die.
I played the first. I played the first Assassin's Creed, and I played it all the way through, and I just ignored all the fetch quest stuff. And then I started playing Assassin's Creed, I think Brotherhood, and I realized that I was going to be playing the exact same game, and I gave up on the Assassin's Creed series.
Yeah.
I was like,
It's
nope.
an interesting beast, actually. That's one that I'm sure we could do.
Oh yeah, it's
Yeah.
one day.
But again, Demon Souls.
Yeah, Demon Souls. Yeah.
So I think what you were saying with the items is a fantastic idea of, and it lends itself as well to the idea of you being immersed in this world and as part of the storytelling, because every single item, every sword, every shield, anything that you pick up at all in the world is part of that world, and is part of you learning about that world, even if it's the smallest minute detail that you wouldn't have thought about. Like, it adds this kind of sense of tangibility to the things that you're doing. And you went out and you found that item, and you didn't pick it up and go, oh, okay, there's a Healy potion. Okay, I know what to use that for. You picked it up, you saw it, and you realized the context of the item, not only in the world and the world's lore, but what it means to you now to have it. And to have it on your person, and it strengthens the ties that you have to the world and the story that you're trying to figure out as you play through, and it drives you to explore more, which drives you to find more story, which drives you, and that kind of aiding with your exploration, it aids with when you do eventually hit that point where you've done a ton of exploring, what you would think maybe like, oh, I'm getting close to the end of the game, and you look back on everything you've done and you have all these mementos of what the game has taught you about the world, and what you've experienced, and what you've found, and perhaps the things that you've missed, and perhaps the things that you have yet to find. And it opens so many doors to making you feel like you're part of that world, that I think I've seen a lot of people who haven't played a lot of Souls games, or haven't played through that kind of game before, criticize the game in the sense of, oh, why would you lock the story behind finding random items? And I think that misses the point of why they've done what they've done. Yeah. The whole point is that it's part of the world, and to become part of the world and learn about the world. Think of it like real life. If you're in a city and you walk down the high street of a city without looking at anything or interacting with anything, and you run to the other end of the high street, you don't go, wow, this city sucks, there's nothing to do here.
Like, hey, I mean, imagine you're playing a game that is designed for you to collect a bunch of things, where it's actually meaningful to collect the things. Yeah, Elder Scrolls!
But I want to just drop a bunch of cheese off a mountain. Come on.
Yeah, I need all of these apples and baskets and bowls.
What do you mean that all of these sweet rolls are worth nothing?
It's funny, Ben. You made that comparison to walking down like a busy street in a big city, not looking at anything, just running to the end and being like, "Wow, this city sucks." But you have the flip of that. You'll have people that they won't even bother leaving their house to go to that street. to explore the street, they'll just Google what they want out of it, and now they just know where exactly to go, and they miss everything else. And that's one of the dangers of using a walkthrough. Not that using a walkthrough is bad. I've done that many times, especially for some really long games, especially RPGs and stuff, where maybe you don't want to miss particular things. Using a walkthrough is fine, but in a game like Dark Souls, if you follow a walkthrough, you're going to miss stuff. But if you choose to not follow a walkthrough, maybe you're going to find stuff you wouldn't have otherwise found, but you're still going to miss stuff. And I think that's the beauty of the Souls games, all of them, is getting everything in one playthrough is so unrealistic, especially your first one, because there's just so much. I feel like the games are designed for you to not find everything your first time through, which is why there are some items, especially in 2, that you can't get your first time. You have to wait until your second playthrough to get them or to understand them. And that's interesting, and that it has its good and its bads, but you know.
So, and that's another thing that like I think is really, really interesting, and that I love about talking about the kind of the development. You can see the influences on other games that have influenced the Soul series, because it calls back, bringing up that walkthrough thing, it calls back to taking Demon Souls and Dark Souls and looking at them. They're designed to be a more traditional game experience. You're exploring a world, and it just the way that you said that about the walkthrough, it made me think of, well, you're never going to get anything on your first playthrough, but you might play through the entire game and you'll be talking with your friend about the game, and you'll be like, yo, did you see that one thing I found here in Anne Orlando? Did you find this one thing? And they're like, whoa, no, but did you find this thing? And the idea of information swapping and having that organic experience with the game and experiencing that with other players as well, and having each person have found their own interesting little pieces, and for a whole community to start piecing that together, an entire world and its story as a group, is something that's really interesting to me, and I love about the research that I've done looking into this whole series, is seeing how much of a fantastic fan base it has and how invested everybody is. And I think it lends itself to that kind of old school on the playground swapping secrets kind of thing of, did you ever try and do this and this? I heard if you did this and this happens. And although sure, nowadays we've got the internet and walkthroughs and that kind of, but the organic nature of and the way that the game leads you to do that on your own volition. If you didn't look anything up about the game, you would have a vastly different story experience to what other people had. And comparing that with your friends is not only, it adds to the experience and it adds to what the game is, and it ridiculously increases the replayability of these kind of games, because you want to go back and you want to find those things and you want to find out more and you want to find out what you missed and what maybe you did miss. And well, your friend found something here, so maybe if you go there you'll find other things as well. And it adds so much to the experience of playing through the game, that you just don't get with a lot of games these days.
It kind of reminds me of Metal Gear Solid 1, how you need to look at the code on the back of the back of the case to progress in the game, and a lot of people that didn't click. But if you were playing it and other people you knew, like maybe people in the playground, if one person figured it out, like that was a revelation. You know, that was what? That was one of those moments, and that's just something that you don't really get nowadays because of the internet.
Man, the Soul series is just, for me, has been such a continuous source for the past like 7 years of just like, wait, what? Like things about the game, things about the story, like it just, I keep finding new things about this game that I didn't know before, that I keep feeling like, nah, yeah, I've seen all of Dark Souls and I get it. And then something just recently, like I actually one thing that I never did before in the first Dark Souls was go through the cat area of the Darkroot Garden. I'd never actually done that before, because I'd seen the ladder and I'd seen the cats, but the first time it happened to me, I just got killed. So I was like, screw that place. Yeah. So for like the next 700 to 1,000 hours, I don't even know how much I have of playing Dark Souls, I never even went through that area again. And I had no idea what actually happened there. Turns out there's a few cats that you kill them, and there's like an area that you can kind of cheese them at, and then you go through and you're at the second part of Darkroot Garden. It's a shortcut. I didn't know. I've been playing completely differently the whole time.
That's one of those really cool things about, you know, you having different experiences based on what you do or don't find based on exploration, which is really cool. And hello, Elias, nice try. Uh, so
That'll be really easy to explain in the YouTube VOD.
well, it kind of appeared at the top of the screen. I'm just not acknowledging it, Elias. So we talked about we hadn't. This was like further down on my list for Demon Souls. We kind of already talked about the remake, the interconnectivity, and the world already. So we got to those amazingly.
There's more we can talk about with the world.
Yeah, well, but first,
Mhm.
the bosses.
Ah,
So this is going to be an interesting topic on each of the Souls games as we get to them.
oh yes.
But for Demon Souls, were the bosses good? And also, were they intertwined with the world in which they inhabit?
Oh, like no game after it.
Wow, that's some high
For
praise.
sure, man. Like, so this is the thing: is intertwined like no intertwined with the world after around it. The thing about Demon Souls is that all of the areas in the game aren't necessarily connected physically. You know, they're all in very different regions of the world geographically,
Mhm.
and so the bosses are connected sort of with themselves, but they are connected with the rest of the world. There's absolutely that connection there. But the thing is, let me talk about a particular boss in Demon Souls that I think is one of the best arguments as to why Demon Souls did what Miyazaki was trying to do with the Souls experience way better than any game after it, and that's Maiden Estrella. Now, Maiden Estrella is a character in the end of the Valley of Defilement. The Valley of Defilement is Demon Souls' Poison Swamp area. The only difference is that the entire area is Poison Swamp, and Maiden Estrella is a character who is a demon, but she is a human. She is a human from a church who is guarded by a man named Garl Vinland. And Maiden Estrella is very different from every character that you fight, every demon that you fight in the rest of Demon Souls, in that there is pretty much absolutely no reason to not think that she's a very good person, because her entire existence within that game, and particularly within that area, is the Valley of Defilement is an area that Miyazaki described as being, if Tower of Latria is the area of man-made evil, the Valley of Defilement is natural evil. It is a place where sort of the refuse of the world is thrown away. There are people and children that have been thrown away into the Valley of Defilement and died there. There are some of the bosses that you fight are the Leechmonger and the Dirty Colossus. The Leechmonger being a gigantic mass of leeches that just feeds on all of the carcasses that get thrown into the Valley of Defilement. And the Dirty Colossus is an embodiment of all of the filth and disgustingness that has been coalesced in that area. But Maiden Estrella is completely different. She's a person that traveled into the Valley of Defilement with her bodyguard, Garl Vinland, to basically take into herself the defilement of the valley. She's essentially sucking up the poison, and she's responsible for reviving and giving life to a lot of the beings that live down there.
That sounds
and
familiar.
yeah, and so when you go to fight Maiden Estrella, you don't actually fight Maiden Estrella. You fight Garl Vinland, who is there to protect Maiden Estrella from harm. The first thing that happens when you walk into the area is Garl Vinland says to you, "There's nothing here for you to loot. There's nothing important for you to get here. You need to leave. This is a sacred place." And then you don't. And Garl says, "All right, I warned you. Now I'm going to defeat you." He obviously fails, to which he says, "I'm sorry, Maiden. I failed you." And you walk into the poison that Maiden Estrella is sitting within, where all of these weird creatures are like praising her, and she says to you, "I see you're here for the demon soul. Fine then, I won't fight you. I know what you're here for. I know I can't win." And she kills herself.
Damn.
Damn.
Now that feeling that you just had, that is not a feeling. that I have gotten from any other boss in the rest of the Souls series. And the reason why is part of what makes Dark Souls bosses so interesting is because they, like many things in the Souls series, they go against the conventions of normal normal video games. And something that I would say is that you can take the entire Souls series and put it on a linear graph. And on one side is replayability, and on the other side is, let's say, meaningful experience.
Okay.
I would say that Demon Souls is on the side of meaningful experience, as far away from replayability as possible, because it's such an inhospitable game, and the combat system isn't necessarily as designed as the rest of the games are. I guess over here for the intensity of the combat system, because as the Souls games went on, they leaned more and more on that sort of shonen, fast paced. You know, the stamina meter was such a completely revolutionary idea, the way that it was implemented into the Souls games, that as the games went on, they just inevitably leaned more and more onto it, to the point where you get to Dark Souls 3, which is just everybody's flipping around and doing all kinds of crazy stuff all the time. But in Demon Souls, the enemy encounters were clunkier, which lends into the sort of survival horror aspect of it. But that sort of made them more terrifying. It made you feel less powerful. And nothing makes you feel less powerful in Demon Souls or in the entire Souls series than that boss fight with Maiden Estrella. Because once you do that, you really start to question if anything that you're doing is right. And you know, there's definitely moments for sure in the rest of the Souls series where you go, am I doing the right thing? But man, nothing hits like Maiden Estrella. And there's a lot of bosses like that. I think one of the only bosses in Dark Souls that really tried to sort of express that gimmicky, I don't know what the right word for it would be, but that very subversive um, design philosophy is probably the Bed of Chaos, and we all know how that went. So
Yeah.
it's like, and then when you go into Dark Souls 3, it's like, I can't think of any bosses in Dark Souls 3 that I don't fight just by rolling around and having a big epic battle, which is like, that has its own merit. And I would say it's in the replayability of the games. You know, you can play with so many different builds and
Yep.
and have a lot of fun with the really solid mechanics that they made. That's what I think Dark Souls 3 really shines in. And I think Dark Souls 2 really shines in that as well. But I think Dark Souls, and to a higher extent Demon Souls, really shine in the fact that the clunkiness of the game lends itself to a much more meaningful experience while engaging with it. And
Yep.
while that does make replaying the games a little less fun from a mechanical perspective, it makes them much more meaningful from a narrative perspective, which I think was the entire point of the games. And that, I forget exactly what the original thing that you said was, but that's sort of my why yeah, whatever. I can't remember exactly what you said, so I can't remember what I was.
We were
what I
just
was
talking about
saying, so-
bosses in general.
Bosses, right,
yeah.
right. And
Yeah.
so that's why I think that the bosses in Demon Souls really did what was special about Souls better than the rest of the series did. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, for as far as like the world itself goes, that's really the last main talking point that I have, because we've already covered everything else with Demon Souls. So is there anything else in the world of Demon Souls that you want to touch on before we leap into Dark Souls 1, where I can actually contribute more?
Yes, because there is a very important through line narratively between Demon Souls and Dark Souls. And the world is a part of this, because Dark Souls is it's a narrative experience in every sense of the word. The Ludo narrative of Dark Souls is all about it's allegorical, it's conceptual, everything's a metaphor, everything's a representation, you know. And the story of Demon Souls is the story of the relationship between people and the world. And I would say more deeply than that, it's the relationship, or rather the confrontation of people with reality. And shoot, I lost my train of thought. So it's right. So Demon Souls, like Dark Souls, although Dark Souls uses a different concept. Dark Souls is, I think, a little bit more about entropy, but Demon Souls is sort of about, um, I think, the very fundamental struggle and confrontation with suffering. Because in the final area of Demon Souls, spoiler alert, you face King Allant, and King Allant is kind of the main character, uh, the main antagonist of Demon Souls, and he's sort of the Gwyn of Demon Souls. And as Gwyn made a sin by linking the first flame, King Allant's sin is the presumption that out of his nihilism, that the world should be allowed to die. And as a result of that, he awakened the Old One, which is the Eater of Souls, so that the Old One could come into the world of Demon Souls and devour everything, which is sort of the this is, I think, the most important thing to understand if you're going to understand the story of Demon Souls, because again, we talk a lot about the lore and the events of the Souls series. We don't talk enough about what it's actually about. What makes the Souls series, at its core, as meaningful of an experience as it is because the message is the fundamental message of life. It is the fundamental question of meaning. And in Demon Souls, King Allant has essentially taken it upon himself, um, sort of in the same way that nihilistic people will take upon themselves as judges of the validity of being. And he has seen the suffering that, which, if you're familiar with the Demon Souls lore, it's a lot of it is a lot of the suffering of the world is attributed to the reawakening of the Old One, but it's very clear that the world was a very terrible place before the awakening of the Old One, as a result of the man-made evils. And Demon Souls is sort of contending with the idea of, like, with all of the evil and all of the suffering in the world, why would you go on? Why would you continue to live in a world that is as terrible as the world of Demon Souls or of Dark Souls, which is, you know, in its own narrative way, very, very similar, if not
Yeah.
appropriate to the real world. It's like, how can we live in this world where these evils exist? That's sort of the fundamental question that the game is confronting. And part of what makes them so meaningful is that they are not, Miyazaki is not keen to answer the question for you. This is what the two endings of both Demon Souls and Dark Souls are all about. It's the question of, well, what do you think? What do you think the meaning of it all is? What do you think the best thing to do would be? But there's a very important presumption in there, is that there is something that needs to be done. The natural course of things is not okay, and somebody has to do something. And so it gives you the choice. Are you going to be the person that confronts this world of suffering and terribleness and say, well, you know, as terrible as things are, perhaps it would be better if they could go on, because what is there otherwise? Or you could be the person that says, there's so much suffering in the world, there's so much evil, it's all doomed to end anyways, why go on? And everything about the world is constructed representationally to be a part of that. Tower of Latria is the man-made evil. Valley of Defilement is the natural evil. The rest of the areas are sort of have their own history to them, especially Boletaria, that contribute to that. And so to talk about the world, you really have to understand that the tower, things like the fact that the Tower of Latria is supposed to represent man-made evil. It's not just an area of events and people. It's an area of meaning. And Dark Souls, Demon Souls is a game of meaning. This is something that really, I think, more than anything, separates it from other games. Because you play a game like, let's say, Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed is a story about a particular bloodline, pretty much, and the events and the people and what they do, but not about what any of it actually means. It's like, it's a corporation, it's an ancient society, it's this character that has a personality that you like, you know, it's events and actions and characters. But Demon Souls and Dark Souls are stories about the world. They're about you. They're about everything that happens. And that's that. We can through line that into the discussion about Dark
Yeah.
Souls.
So it's
Yeah.
actually fascinating learning that from about Demon Souls from you has been really fascinating because for a couple of reasons. One, totally agree. It's like the idea of comparing it to Assassin's Creed, that kind of game. You're not. It's not. You're playing someone else's story. It's like
Hmm.
it's like the difference between hearing a story. It's like the difference between reading a Harry Potter book and reading an old fairy tale that's supposed to have a moral kind of thing.
Correct.
It's
Mythology, man.
it's
Mythology.
it's the difference between like having a story told to you and experiencing a story.
Mhm.
And I think and it's really interesting that I've learned that about Demon Souls and seeing the idea of tearing it all down because there's nothing left, because that seems to tie so beautifully in opposition to everything about Gwyn and the
Yes.
idea of the rekindling.
Yes,
the
and we can
idea
talk
of-
about that,
yeah.
boy. We can talk
and the
because
idea of over and the cycle.
I'm not a Gwyn did nothing wrong kind of person, but I am a Gwyn did the best thing that anybody
He
did.
could. and it's really fascinating hearing that about Demon Souls and then immediately realizing the link that it's going to have to Dark Souls and the subsequent link that will have to Dark Souls 3
Yeah.
and the ending of, but not really the ending of, an actual the
Mhm.
perpetuation of the idea of the cycle of destruction and rebirth as well.
Yes, it's beautiful. It's such a
So
beautiful.
before we roll into Dark Souls 1 like we're about to do, there's a
Yes.
thing that we do here whenever we move from game to game,
Right.
and that is we give the game that we just talked about one of 4 rankings.
Mhm.
And we do this as the way that someone should look at it from the outside that wants to get into the series.
Mhm. Okay.
Would you say that Demon Souls is essential, recommended, optional, or no?
Okay.
That's a tough question.
If you have played a Souls game before and you enjoyed it, and well, I'll just leave it at that. If you have played a Souls game before and you have enjoyed it, it is essential.
That's some high
Absolutely.
praise.
Absolutely, because you need to understand the roots of this series. And like I said, again, I think Demon Souls did the Souls formula best. And if you're going to experience Dark Souls and you're going to enjoy what Dark Souls has to offer,
Mm-hmm.
I guarantee you, if you like Dark Souls 1, you're going to love Demon Souls
Mhm.
because it does everything that Dark Souls does, not better, not better, but in a way that is more focused on its core message and what it's trying to do. So I would call it essential in that sense. I would downgrade it to recommended if the reason why you're interested in Dark Souls is for just the gameplay,
Mm-hmm.
or if you're only interested in Dark Souls, and you're only interested in the story specifically of Dark Souls. You know, if you're not really interested in having that kind of deep experience in the game,
Mhm.
which is perfectly fine. You know, there's plenty of people that only play the Souls games for the gameplay and do not give a shit about the story.
Mhm.
Those people are fine. I've got no qualms with those people. And Dark Souls would probably be the game for you, and Demon Souls probably wouldn't. It's not really as gameplay oriented. I would
Yeah.
recommend Bloodborne, but maybe not as much Demon Souls.
Mm.
But if you like the experience that Dark Souls gives you, play Demon Souls, man. You've got to. It's amazing.
And what about you, Ben? From everything that you've heard,
So, as someone who has like, when I say I've played Demon Souls, I have literally like, I know someone who has it, and I've couch sat and taken the controller and bashed out some gameplay, and then handed the controller back, kind of stuff. And hearing the the kind of the stuff that I have just during this podcast, I think for me, I agree with the pretty much every sentiment of, if what you're looking for, in the Soul series by playing it, is the entire experience of the story and the lore and getting immersed in a world, it sounds like it's going to be essential, and it's definitely one that I'm going to be looking into trying to
Yeah.
to figure out how to get a hold of. The whole exclusivity thing's going to be a bitch to get around, but I'll
Yeah.
I'll figure something out. But again, if you're someone who maybe isn't that deep into it and is looking to who enjoys the formula of the game, like the Souls games, and enjoys playing them, but is just kind of looking for games to play, recommended would probably be for the more general populace. I feel like recommended is probably where Demon Souls would lie.
Yeah, because it's by far the most inhospitable and inaccessible of all the
Yeah.
games. But
Yeah.
that's what makes it the most meaningful experience.
In more ways than one.
There you
Hope
go.
you
I
have
mean,
a
look,
PS3.
that's the message of Dark
This
Souls
is the
in
problem
general.
I had with Nier, and it's happening again.
Look, man, like the thing is, when you're playing Dark Souls, the inaccessibility of the game is what makes it fun. And that's my best sell for Demon Souls. It's
See,
like if you
don't
like
see
that,
inaccessibility, you see exclusivity. That's what the gaming industry has taught me.
yeah, there you go.
I don't think there's anything I can really say that these two dorks haven't said, so I would give it overall recommended. I definitely feel better about Demon Souls as a game more now than I did when I first started playing Dark Souls. Because back when I first started playing Dark Souls, Demon Souls was the overly hard, clunky, not fleshed out bastard child of the series. But now that we're in a time where more and more games are comfortable with doing more world building and story building that isn't hold your hand in your face, it's more accepted as a style of game, and that's a great thing. That is a fantastic thing, and I think that that's a good indicator that, hey, maybe now is the time to visit it if you haven't done so yet.
Yes. Yep, absolutely. I agree.
So Dark Souls 1. All right, so now we get to the fun part.
So now we get to talk about Dark Souls 1.
Yeah, we can talk about my favorite. Yeah, we're good.
Yeah.
So first thing I want to talk about is how, when you boot the game up for the first time, how it sets up the world for you. It gives you this big, epic, whooshy cinematic world introduction.
It's a fucking creation myth. He created a mythology that is like of a biblical proportion. It's incredible. I can't believe how okay, the introduction to Demon Souls is like, yeah, you're walking through a fog, the world sucks, blah blah blah. Dark Souls is like reading the Old Testament. Crazy. What is Miyazaki?
But it's so good. It's so good, not just for world building, but one of the things I love about the intro to Dark Souls 1 is it shows you all of the big badass bosses that you're gonna fight before you've even gotten to the main menu. Like, what? That's so genius, because at the time you don't know. Which gives it that much more meaning the second time you play the game. And it's so good. It's so good. It's so good. And it also lends to, when you encounter those bosses, you're like, wait a minute. This is the guy that did the thing.
Yes.
And now oh God.
Yeah.
And
I'm a part of this, but I don't know how significant it is, but man, it feels significant.
Right? And then you hear a screech in the distance, and you get impaled from the ground up, and then you died, and you can do it again.
And let's just talk about the intro's relation to the intro that comes directly after it, where it's like, here's this amazing, powerful man that is completely Zeus-like, that took down the most old beings in the history with bolts of lightning. Here are these chaos witches that weaved firestorms that destroyed the world. Here's this traitorous, scaleless dragon that revealed the secret of immortality that destroyed the world. Here's this giant skeleton Grim Reaper guy that unleashed a poisonous disease across the exposed flesh of everyone.
You're a beef jerky boy.
You can't even get out because some dude had to drop a dead body with a key on it.
You had to be saved. You suck so much. You were in prison, and you were a beef jerky thing, and some guy that was cooler than you had to save you. That dies immediately.
Yeah, and not only does he save you, he then dies. Fucking Zelda. Even though Zelda doesn't actually die.
You suck.
You are nothing.
And that sets up the emotional tone of the rest of the story and makes every single achievement that you make against anything in the game feel incredible.
Yep, it does. And then you immediately take control of the game. You walk past your poopy pot.
Yes.
You grab your key, you open the door, and then it has the tutorial scribbled on the ground for you.
Mm-hmm.
And you can skip it completely.
Try jumping.
Yeah.
Hold LB to die. Oh, okay.
Which introduces you to the message system to tell you that, like, there are going to be messages in the world that you can use to help you through areas, which is people don't give enough credit to Dark Souls. They always say, well, yeah, no, it's a game where it's just you just go through the game and nothing ever helps you. It's amazing. But it's like, that's not the only reason it's amazing. It's because the only time that it does give you tutorials is by allowing other players to give them to you, which is not always the best thing to try.
Yeah, which is not always, which I think it introduces that really interesting dynamic as well, even with not only within the world, but within the experience of the game of what you can and cannot trust as well.
Yes.
And an already unforgiving and harsh and cruel world, you don't even know if you can trust your fellow player.
And the rating system isn't good or bad or thumbs up, thumbs down. It is just rating.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you
And
don't
you have
know.
If you even want to know what the rating actually is, you have to attune a miracle to even do that. It's like,
and it's like, I'm gonna use this to figure out everything. Are you? Are you really?
Yeah.
Or you could be like Jacob and you could read one of the tutorials that specifically warns you of a horrific mimic and ignore it and go and hit the mimic anyway.
Okay, look, I was busy talking to chat. All right, so look, all right. For those of you that don't know, I was playing Dark Souls 2, and I was walking through this little area, and there was a little message on the ground, and I was paying attention to chat. I was talking to chat because I'm a good streamer, and that's what I do. Okay, I was doing my job, and it said something along the lines of, "There's a mimic up here, be careful." But I was busy talking to chat and reading chat, so I didn't actually read what the message said. So I just kept right on going, and I opened the chat, and I died because there's a mimic. But that's Dark Souls 2, Ben, so you shut up. you leave me alone, okay? It's not my fault. I could even describe what mimic it was, and I bet Charles knows exactly the one.
yes.
Brightstone well.
Ah, yes.
See? See? Oh, I'm still mad about that. Okay, so the world setup was amazing, and we've talked about the way that the game sets up the tutorial. Now, the way you get your Estus, which we talked about the difference between the grass system and the Estus system, so we've already kind of talked about the way that the Estus system works. But when you get the Estus, you can immediately grab it and leave. Or you can stick around and you can learn a few things. I feel like the tutorial of Dark Souls 1 is a lot like the backstory of Demon Souls, in that you get as much of it as you want. And if you pay attention really close, you might learn a thing or two about the world. But you don't have to. It's all optional.
Yeah.
All completely
It gives you
optional.
that to you. And man, like, if we can talk a little bit about getting the Estus in the tutorial, let's also talk about the absolute most important character in all of Dark Souls, which is not the Chosen Undead and not Gwyn, but Oscar.
Snuggly.
Give me smooth, give me soft, baby. No, Oscar is kind of Oscar is probably the most important character in the entire game, and people don't think about that, man. He's the only reason that you leave the cell. He's the only reason that you get the Estus flask. The game could not have started, and you would not have survived. Like, literally, the events of if we remove the player from the identity of the Chosen Undead, and we just think about the Chosen Undead as their own character. The story of Dark Souls is a relationship between the Chosen Undead and the prophecy of linking the fire, and to the same extent Gwyn. None of that would have ever happened if Oscar didn't save a random hollow. And I would actually like to talk about Demon Souls again.
Yeah.
Because there's an item in Demon Souls that is similar to the Great Sword of Artorias in Dark Souls, that is a sword that you craft from Maiden Estrella's soul, which scales with pretty much every single stat. And like we talked about, that game being about the place of people and their confrontation with reality in the world. The thing about that sword is that once you have met all the requirements and you get to a certain level with them, it starts scaling with another stat that's completely hidden. Luck. And this is something that was carried over into Dark Souls 3. Miyazaki has this idea that I think is really interesting, about how he feels it very important to present the fact of luck as being just as important as, you know, as strength, as intelligence, as anything that's meaningful to people. It matters just as much that you're the right person, that you're in the right place. And the fact that Dark Souls 1 starts out literally on a fluke, I think is a really, really good decision that he made, to make it so that I needed someone else that randomly got just before he died.
So I have an interesting question for you when it comes to the Chosen Undead. When it comes to the Chosen Undead in general, like take the Asylum, do you think the Chosen Undead, especially the one you play as in Dark Souls 1, do you believe that they were chosen from the moment that they were dropped that key? Or do you believe that by proving themselves, by surpassing the Asylum demon, is what proves the Chosen to be the Chosen Undead?
The prophecy of the Chosen Undead is that of the man who will make a pilgrimage from the Undead Asylum and travel to the Land of Lords to ring the bells of awakening, to go on to link the flame. And you are not the Chosen Undead. I'd say the only time that the game would actually, I'd say the Chosen Undead is whoever links the flame, right? But I would say when you become the Chosen Undead in the game is when you ring the two bells of awakening, because that's the only thing that you know for sure no one has ever done before.
Yeah.
And you go up to Frampt after having done it, and he says, "Heavens, it's really you! It's finally you!" Even though you haven't killed any of the Great Lords yet, you're the only one that's made it through the Undead Parish and through Blighttown and rang both of the bells. So I'd say that's the moment where you become the Chosen Undead, really. Once
That's
you get
interesting.
to Lord Vessel.
Yeah,
Interesting.
that's interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way. I always assumed that because it was the person who makes the pilgrimage, the moment you crouch in that nest and that bird just yeets you away, I was like, okay, that's the moment.
Well, we could talk about the crow, because the crow is the symbol of Velka, and I would say that there's some lore connection between Velka actually being a part of the prophecy and possibly being related, if not one of the wives of Gwyn.
Oh.
Ooh, that sounds like deep lore.
It's pretty deep lore. It's not anything confirmed, but it's a little interpretation of mine.
Welcome to the inevitable world of speculation.
Yeah.
So, avoiding the deep, dark rabbit hole of the deep speculative lore of the Souls games, because there is something that I feel like we can't really talk about the Souls series about without touching on, and that is that these games are hard as balls. Let's talk about why that's a good thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, this is coming from a little bitch that doesn't like hard games.
Oh, it would actually be nice to talk about like how you played the game and how I played the game and how I got you into my way of playing the game and how I got into your way of playing the game.
Yeah. So the game is hard as balls, but you could choose so many different ways to play that I wouldn't say you make your own difficulty, but you kind of make your own difficulty.
You kind of make your own difficulty.
Yeah.
I have a story about that as well.
Now, you've probably seen or heard people say that if you play Dark Souls with magic, you're playing on easy mode. Yes and no. Because you have range, you have the high ground. Haha. It is easier, but the majority of people do play melee,
Mhm.
which, you know, that comes with its own strengths and weaknesses, of course.
Yes.
But I do think that while I would say the game is a bit easier if you're using magic or pyromancies, it's not easy. Easier, yes, maybe, but easy, no. Because I feel like the game is designed in such a way to be accessible but also difficult for each style. So you have all these styles, but it's not that there's the one true style if you want to beat the game easily. It's still very skill based. It's still very, you need to know what you're doing. You need to learn. It's just what you learn and where you learn it and the way in which you learn it are completely different.
Yes.
You can get builds where you just you carry a giant fucking sword with no armor and you roll around like somebody I know, which is not how I played the game my first time. I started playing the game like that after Charles showed me that that was his preferred method, was to run around with big sword and no armor, because he would dodge like fucking crazy. He would just, an enemy go to swing at him, he'd roll out of the way. And he'd keep rolling until he had an opportunity to hit. And whenever he did hit, it was a big hit because it was a big weapon. But it was really slow. So each attack mattered. Each one had a very specific impact to it. And that's cool. That's not how I played it my first time. My first time I played it, I did 3 things. I ran around with Quelog's Fury Sword. I ran around in full bulky-ass Havel armor. And I used pyromancies.
Yes.
So I ran around with a one-handed sword, full armor, and big ass shield, and then I would hot swap to light things on fire with my hands. What this meant is that instead of dodging, because I couldn't dodge because I was too fat and I was too heavy, and if I tried to dodge, it would move me ridiculously slow, I would instead use my shield to block. Now, blocking is very different from dodging. The way that it works is drastically different. And it also depends on what kind of shield you use if you're blocking, as to how well it works. It's not just as simple as you have a shield. There are many different shields in the game, each with many different statistics that are good for different situations. Once again, more of the whole, you can kind of build your own adventure thing based on the way you want to play, and it's incredible. But you have a shield that isn't super great at being a shield, but it gives you passive bonuses, like I think it's called the Grass Crest shield. That restores your stamina more quickly. I wouldn't use that in combat as a shield. You can, but I feel like it's more designed to be more of a passive thing. Now, if you have Havel Shield, it's got, I want to say it's a 100% physical block.
Yes.
Which means that if you block with it, you're not going to take any damage. But other shields that aren't going to be as big and bulky as Havel's, which that has its advantages of not being as heavy, so maybe you can move a little faster. Maybe you could dodge if you absolutely have to. But they're not going to have as much physical protection. So you might block and hit your shield, but you're still going to take damage, albeit very, very little. And it just completely changes the way you play the game. Instead of trying to bait your opponent into attacking so that you can dodge out of the way and then hit them in the back, you're just holding a shield in front of you, being very patient and cautious and waiting for that one moment where you can get a hit or two in. It completely changes the way you view the game. And then you have things like magic and pyromancies and miracles that are drastically different. You know, you sitting in the back, you're firing magic missiles at people, getting up real close and trying to light them on fire, and there's just completely different ways you can play the game, and like the different gameplay styles of Dark Souls. We could go on for hours and hours and hours.
Or you can do what I did and go into the game for the very first time, not knowing anything at all about the Souls series or anything at all, apart from all I knew was it was supposed to be quite hard. And I, while making my first character, because there was so many options, was like, fuck it, I'm just going to start out with something basic, and decided I was going to be a deprived and played through my first time on the game and started playing through as the deprived and was like, wow, this game really is hard.
Yep.
People weren't kidding when they said it was hard.
Hey man, picking Deprived as your first class is a pretty good experience because one, you're gonna get the hardest experience, and two,
Yeah.
you can turn your character into anything.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
I
Which
mean,
you could probably just do by creating a new character and picking a different class.
Hey!
I will say that I did not beat the game with the Deprived. I believe I got about as far as Quilog before I was like, right, I'm gonna
Yeah, I figured you were gonna say Blighttown.
yeah, where I'm gonna be like, right, okay, I'm gonna just start over and pick something different.
Yeah.
Which I ended up going with Big Sword Dodgy Roll.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Very
Yeah.
popular.
And so we can talk about the I can talk about the mechanics briefly because I'm assume that most of the people, if not everyone that's going to be watching this, has played Dark Souls, so you know they're familiar with the nuances there. But I think that one thing that I really want to dispel is the idea of viability in builds, because the PvP scene of Dark Souls started to, as the game became older and older and people became more familiar with the mechanics, started to sort of take over the design, or I guess you could say the design that people would go for in their characters. People gave up on the idea of playing certain builds because they weren't viable anymore. One thing that I feel is very tragic is the death of tower shields. Jacob, you're one of the only people that I've ever met that actually use tower shields, because everyone uses medium shields because they want to have the utility of being able to parry.
Yeah.
And it's a shame because every single style of Dark Souls is very fun to play. Even me, who used to be a complete magic hater, started playing magic builds recently, sort of figured them out a little bit better than I used to understand them, and I've been having a lot of blasts with them, even though it goes completely against my style of play. The reason why I'm Rolly Big Stick Man is because I enjoy the intensity of engaging with a bunch of enemies, maneuvering through them as skillfully as possible, and then punishing them with something that is extremely satisfying to use, like a giant stick. My first playthrough, I used the Zweihander, not knowing that the Zweihander was like a meta weapon, because I don't think it was yet. I don't think only Afro had made that video yet. But I did that, and I ended up finding the Great Club down in Blighttown, and I thought, oh, that would be so funny, just hitting everything with a giant wooden stick. Turned out to be one of the best weapons in the game, unbeknownst to me. So, and that just ended up being the playstyle that I stuck with, and I found that very satisfying. I found it. I found myself very hesitant to go with anything else. But then eventually I realized, you know, I really appreciate these games. I'd love to appreciate them fully. So I started trying like dexterity builds. I tried playing quality builds. And most recently, actually literally within the past month, once you told me that I was going to be a part of this podcast, I was like, I've never played a spell build. So I put one together, and man, not only have I been having a really fun time with it, PvP sure is easy. Like, let me tell you something right now, all right? I used to get so mad at the magic builds that would PvP me, because I'm just like, I can't do anything against you. I mean, I can. It just takes a lot of like skill and time and patience, but like, it's just, you're so unfun. You just stand over there, you cast your friggin' Soul Mass or Affinity, and then you cast Dark Bead or Crystal Soul Spear or something, and then I die in one hit. It's like, great fun. Like, I get to make one mistake, but you get to make like 20. It's like, cool, you know, that's a real fun way to play the game. But then playing a spell build, I realized, you know, first of all, as far as the covenant system is concerned, this is a really good way of leveling up in a covenant. Second of all, if sorcery builds didn't have that, I don't know what they would have for PvP. Like the ability to just completely one-shot people from a distance. It's like, well, once somebody gets up in your face, it's like, we're just gonna backstab you, and then you're dead.
Yeah.
It's like, but that was the funnest part about PvPing as a sorcery build, was I never got backstabbed, which is something that in Dark Souls 1 was like, I did not think was possible. That game is backstab central because of the immediate backstab animation. So it's like, it was so satisfying to be able to play PvP and actually like fight people skillfully. You know, like
Yeah.
that felt so great. So I have to say, it's like I really believe that every build is viable in Dark Souls, and that if you want to be the kind of person that dresses up in all Havels, that fat rolls, that uses a tower shield, and that just uses like, you know, maybe even just like a regular longsword that's like enchanted with lightning. It's like, go for it, man. That play style may not be fun for everyone, but it will be fun for the type of person who enjoys having the utility of being able to block behind a shield, being able to go into a combat situation and take a lot of damage without anything happening. See, that's the sort of the main difference in my playstyle versus a Havel playstyle. Is a Havel playstyle is I want to be able to take damage and make mistakes without having to pay for it. My playstyle is I want to pay for all my actions, but I want to really make people pay for theirs. So it's
High
and
risk,
it's
high
like
reward.
exactly, and that's my lifestyle, man. That's who I am. I'm a high risk, high reward person. That's why I have a YouTube channel.
Yeah, we're content creators. It's very high risk, high reward. That's
Pretty
the
much.
name of the
It's just
game.
It's just like I'm probably going to be useless, and even if I succeed, I might not even do anything of worth. It's like, woo!
I have a name, you know.
What a fantastic Jacob impression you do.
Nice, go for it. But yeah, so yeah, it's I want to give some respect to everybody's playstyle, man.
Yep.
Whether you're a broken straight sword or you're friggin' giant dad, I don't care. Like Dark Souls is a game that should be played the way you want to play it, because that's part of the narrative. The way that you play the game, there's so many options in the combat. It's probably going to be a part of your personality, which is just immerses you in the world even more.
Yeah.
And you know what's great about the story of Dark Souls 1? Every single build that you ever do is also canon.
It's true.
Yeah. And
Thank you, Dark
that's
Souls 3.
crazy. That's crazy to me, and I can't wait to get there.
Oh yeah. Oh, I might cry when we get to that. I'm not even fucking like. I'm not fucking with you.
So there's something I saw that Havoc in chat asked, like at the beginning of this podcast episode, favorite weapon.
Ooh.
And now that we finally covered this, we can actually answer that question. So favorite weapon, and since you've already got a hard on for it, Charles, I'm gonna go ahead and start with you. Favorite weapon.
The standard longsword. I mean, look, man, as much respect as I have for everything in that game, gigantic stupid stick is always going to be my absolute favorite way to play Souls games, because not only is it so satisfying to kill anything with that, it's like it's a bit of levity in this world of horrible, bleak atmosphere. It's kind of fun to just carry around Smo's hammer and just bunk things like it's a Tom and Jerry cartoon.
Yeah.
It's hilarious, and it's also extremely viable as a strategy for PvE. And I would say that too is like, my strategy sucks for PvP. I'll just say it right now. Unless I can get in for a backstab or people don't know how to dodge grape weapons, it's like they take forever to swing. You just look at me and wait for my animation to start and then press B and I can't hit you. It's like, but I still have a lot of success in PvP for some fucking reason. So, you know, it's like, but it's so fun as the PvE experience, because you just get to run around and just bonk. It's too fun. That's great club, giant hammers. That's my favorite thing in the world.
Fair. What about you, Ben?
Actually, the very first thing that popped into my head was Smo's hammer. Because the experience of having that boss fight, right? And seeing this, and especially the cutscene that plays when Smo just completely like obliterates Ornstein. I was like, whoa. And then when you get to use that hammer and just like, whoa.
Yeah, no, that too is that it gives you, it makes you feel like you have so much power against the bosses. Whereas like if you're just swinging around a dinky sword, it's like, I don't feel like I'm killing you, but I'm doing a lot of damage. This is really weird.
It goes from shiving your ankles to I'm gonna smash your face.
I'm going to kill you in 3 hits.
And I just love that ridiculous feeling of, it's going to take me 2 months to swing at you, but boy, when I do.
It's going to feel fun, and it's going to look funny as hell.
Yeah.
Yep.
1,000%.
For me, I know this is kind of an odd choice, but I think my favorite one, and this isn't one I ever really use in subsequent playthroughs, and I don't think I've used it in a very, very long time, but my favorite weapon is Quelaag's Fury Sword.
Good choice.
I like the way that it looks. It's very interesting.
Yes.
It scales with humanity, I believe. So the more humanity you have banked, the more damage it's going to do, which is a bit of a high risk, high reward system, because if you die, all that humanity is going to drop on the ground with your souls. So if you die twice before you can get your shit back, then it just absolutely neuters your weapon. But one of the reasons it's my favorite is not only because it was my first like boss weapon that felt like, oh, this is so cool. When you swing that thing, it has fire that comes out of it, and it looks fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And yes, that is why it is my favorite. I don't care.
Yeah,
I
mean,
love
look,
that
man,
sword.
We're simple men. We are simple men.
I
We
want
like
a
the
Quelaag Fury
stick
sword that
does the fun.
Right? I want one that every swing has a different element that comes out of it. So you swing it once, it's got fire. You swing it again, it's got lightning behind it. You swing it again, it's got, I don't know, fucking ice. I know that's not even a thing in Dark Souls, but I want it anyway.
It's a thing in Dark Souls 3. That's
that's fair,
something
yeah.
that I bet Dark Souls 2 probably would have ended up doing, because they did do the thing where they made a staff that can do anything.
Yeah. I want that in sword form, and that it scales with humanity was really interesting.
Yeah,
to me.
that would be actually cool. That, you know what? There should have been a weapon like the Great Sword of Artorias that you need a really high level in every single stat, but it gives you every single type of damage, just very neutered. Like maybe make it like a dagger.
Yeah,
I think
like
that would
like a jack of all trades weapon.
That would be amazing. It's a dagger, so like it's not really like viable for like actually fighting people with. But if you get a riposte, which removes sort of the defense system, so there's a problem in Dark Souls with split damage in that everything has defenses for every type of damage, and so if you have like a great club that does 600 physical versus an enchanted great club that does like 350 physical, 350 magic, but you're facing an enemy that has really high in both defenses, you're going to do more damage with the physical, which is a general rule in Dark Souls. You want one type of damage so that you can bypass one type of defense.
Right.
But when you do ripostes, it completely removes defenses, basically. And that's why ripostes do so much damage, is not only are they multiplicative, but they bypass defenses. So if you had a weapon that really sucked at doing damage normally, but if you could do like a backstab or a parry with it, it would absolutely kill, and it would do all of the effects. That would be cool. I would love that as a weapon idea.
That's really fascinating, actually. I would like that a lot.
Yeah.
So
just make it an offhand. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be amazing. Now there's something that we touched on a little bit, and I want to like iron that out now, and that's storytelling through items.
Yes.
And I think that this was really the first game. I don't know that it was the first game I played that did it, but it was the first game that I played that did it, that I really noticed it and cared.
Yes.
Something that you mentioned earlier when we were talking about Demon Souls is about how, you know, the story isn't thrown in your face and you have to go and get it. And I feel like Dark Souls storytelling through items is not only is it a great way to get you to hunt for new items, to give you that sweet, juicy lore, it's also a way to make you feel more engaged with the world, especially because, like you guys were talking about Smo's hammer. Not only is it the weapon of a dude you kick the shit out of, but it's also it's so much more than that, because you get to learn about the character that wielded it simply by reading the description.
It has a personality attached to it
exactly.
as well, and when you use it, you feel a connection to that character, and perhaps, especially these games are meant to be role-playing games. So it's like if you're playing a character that you have like an idea in your head, it's like the game is giving you basically D&D character sheets that allow you to more flesh out your character.
And I think that's really, really fascinating, which actually leads to another thing, which was I didn't actually plan for them to run together so beautifully, but cryptic and or unreliable NPCs. Because that's something in Dark Souls.
Oh, yes.
If they aren't cryptic, they're unreliable, or they're both. There is no one that just
Um,
gives you a straight answer to anything.
I would like to give a little bit. I would like to give a little bit of foreshadowing for when we eventually talk about Dark Souls 3. I think that Patches is the best NPC in the entire series. I think that it is one of the not only one of the funniest, but also one of the deepest characters in the entire series.
Mm.
That being said,
Mm.
do you mind if I take a short pee break?
Go for it.
Thank you.
Actually, you know what? I got to pee too. So, hey
Wow.
Ben, you're
Yeah.
on your own for a minute.
Let's take a little break.
Yeah, I can't wait to play this back on YouTube here in 2 days to hear what you had to say while we were gone. So, good
Oh
luck
yeah,
to you.
please.
Yeah.
Ben, you have the floor. It is time for you to speak of Dark
Okay.
Souls like no one has before.
Right. I got this. Don't worry. So, hey guys, how's it going? I could talk about Dark Souls, or I could just completely derail this podcast entirely, and I could just make it my own podcast about Nier and Nier Automata, and I could just speak about that for ages while everybody's peeing. This is my chance. You'll never let me do a Nier episode, guys. This is the only chance I'm going to have. Which I would like to say, unironically, it's interesting. I actually think it's something I'll definitely be recommending the Nier series to Charles if he hasn't played it already, because Dark Souls is a game series that is very much narratively focused, and it's more of an experience to make you think about the world around you and the impact that you have on the world and it forces you to take a step back and have a look at things around you. And I think that there's a lot of games that do that. I mean, all joking aside, I do Nier is another fantastic game series that does that. There's a lot of game series that do that, and I'm interested to delve deeper into the Dark Souls series as someone who's such a huge fan of Nier, the way it does its storytelling, and the kind of philosophical questions it makes you ask yourself, and the reflection it makes you have on, well, with in the case of Nier, the nature of humanity and what makes us human and what makes us an individual. It's very interesting to see how the views that you have on life are directly affected by those experiences that you can have, and the idea that a game's narrative can not only influence the way that you think but give you thought to the kind of philosophies you hold in life and the way that other people view things. It can help provide context for a lot of things in the world that you might not have otherwise had the thought to consider. And although some people might argue, Herder, it's just a game, it ain't that deep, bro. It's about what you take from the experience, and games like Nier and games like Dark Souls that you can explore these thoughts and these processes and these philosophies in are what make video games as a whole such a powerful medium, because it's not just like, sure, you can have a discussion after watching a movie, and sure, you can have a discussion after reading a book individually, but a video game is something that you can physically pick up and do and play and experience with other people, as communities, as friends, as strangers, as an individual. And it has such a wide breadth as a medium that with cause for thought, that when it's used in the same way that Dark Souls or Nier or other narrative driven games are, it can be powerful for self-reflection, and it can be powerful for the way that somebody thinks. Also, welcome back, guys.
Yeah, I would actually say video games are the only medium, the only art medium that is, where self-development is a necessary part of the process of the development of the narrative.
I'm just gonna assume you're talking about Nier.
So I did.
Yeah, that's
I made
very
that
you.
joke.
Yeah.
I made the joke that I was going to derail the podcast and that it's a Nier podcast now.
Yeah.
But then kind of got back on the actual track of speaking about how the narrative of games and the idea that a game like, especially as I'm very quickly becoming to learning more about, is how a game series like Dark Souls, or inevitably one like Nier, can force one to kind of think about philosophies of themselves, the things that they've thought in life, to consider things that they might not have considered before. and to consider other perspectives on things, and to consider the world around them and the effect that they have on it. Just in the same way that you playing a character has had an effect on the world of the game, and how that can translate to how you as a person act towards other people.
How strange it is that Dark Souls had to remind us that video games are an aesthetic experience.
Yeah, I know, right? So I want to derail for
How
just a
strange.
second and tell you about my bathroom experience.
Thank you.
So on my way back in, I open the door, I close it behind me, I walk forward, and I don't know what the fuck, but I slipped, right? And I took like all the way, just bam, hit the ground. And on the way down, like I was trying to grab for something so that I wouldn't smash into the ground like an idiot. My thumb snagged my trash bag that goes out tonight, ripped it, and I got some kind of gross sticky shit all over my hand. It smells like ammonia. So that's where I'm at in my life right now. I can't even go to the fucking bathroom without my life falling apart. So thanks for that.
What you need to do, take the Demon Souls approach and just end it all.
Just
Don't
go
you
through the bag,
understand?
find whatever
No
that
one
was,
wants
and just
to go on like
just-
this.
My life is Dark Souls, and I forgot to dodge roll to miss whatever the fuck was on the ground.
Dude, if you would have used your iframes, you would have been able to avoid getting your thumb in that.
Imagine if we could have iframes when we eat something like fattening, so that it doesn't affect us. You just
Would
eat
it go
cake and
straight-
it gives you no calories.
As you
What did
take a bite, you dodge roll.
What if you were what if you were eating and then you dodge roll and then it just like falls out of your body incorporeally?
Oh my god, it'd be amazing, actually. That would be the one thing I think about is how can I use this to be less fat? Perfect.
Is this it? The food of the dark soul.
Well, we've already got the paint of the Dark Soul, which we can touch on.
Exactly.
So cryptic
Awesome.
and or unreliable NPCs.
Yes.
Yeah. So not counting patches, because fuck you patches. I think one of the ones I want to talk about most is actually Framped.
Really?
Peter Frampton,
okay.
as I call
Okay.
him, because that's the only thing I knew that started with Framped at the time. It's hard to talk about Framped without talking about Gwen.
and about cough.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Which
Yep.
you know, Frampton, the two definitely not identical looking beings.
Yeah.
definitely not.
Totally different, we promise.
I think as the chosen undead, it's hard for me to explain. Framped pisses me off. And one of the ways that he pisses me off the most is in a game where you create the story and the narrative and everything. It's what you want it to be because of how much you can or can't open the story up because of how you want to do things and how much you care about the story. Framped just says, "Hey, you're gonna do this shit and you're gonna like it."
Yes.
He takes, I mean, obviously it's a game where you're gonna go to these places anyway, so you can beat it because it's a video game and that's what you do. But you have the illusion of control until Framp comes along and takes it from you, and it pisses me off. He feels so
Yeah.
out of place to me.
That's like, see, this is. There's a lot there. Okay, let me see if I can parse this out. What I'm trying
While
to
you think
through.
about it, I'll say a little bit more about Framped and why I think he's an unreliable NPC. He has an incredible bias, and even though you're the object of a prophecy, he wants you on his side of the prophecy, but he acts like it's the good thing, but he doesn't tell you any of the other details.
So
He doesn't give you
here's
the
the-
full picture.
Yeah, here's the thing that I find really interesting about not just Frampton as well is that although you know what their goals are, you do not know what their motivation is.
Hmm.
You know for a fact, you learn that what Framp wants from you is to become the human replacement for Gwen. He
Mhm.
wants to be you to be the successor, but you don't know why. You don't know what his motivations are, what he's gaining, all you know is that that's what he's doing. He's here and he's like, "Hey, you wanna be the next Gwen, bro? Yeah, you wanna be the next Gwen, bro? Of course you do. Let
Which
me
is-
just
which-
fucking eat you real quick."
Which is part of the experience of Dark Souls as a role-playing game because it begs the player to think in the head of their character. So, you know, if you're playing a cleric, it's like, well, of course you are. I mean, the Way of White is completely connected to Gwyn. Why wouldn't you want to be the successor to Gwyn? That's basically saying, like, you are the successor to Jesus. It's like, yeah, give me some of that. But, you know, if you're playing like a thief character, it's like, I don't trust you because I don't trust anyone.
Yeah.
Like, so why would you do anything that the guy said? And the first person that you run into, if you end up running into them, that gives you an opposite perspective is Koth. And it's like, of course you would follow Koth as a thief. It's like, yeah, he's like, all of the order of the world sucks, and you're actually being lied to, and you're like, yeah, duh. That's what my whole life has been about. So yeah, it's very, and so that's something I wanted to say too, is that Frampt is sort of plays the role of like the priest that doesn't follow his own preachings, and it's not necessarily that he doesn't, but he fits that role.
Yeah.
He takes the toxic order position in the game. He's the one that says, this is the way that it's always been, and therefore that's good, and you're going to do it because you can trust me, and I swear to God you can trust me. And it's like, and Koth actually does the exact same thing, except with rather than with an order perspective, he does it with a chaos perspective. He's like, everyone's actually been lying to you, and I'm the one that you should be trusting because you are actually a human, and humans are better than the rest of them, and you should believe that because look at how terrible everything is. You know, obviously this order guy must not have anything together because look at how not together the world is. Therefore, we should totally just abandon it all and let it all fall into the next cycle. That'll be fun. What's Ulasil?
Rabbit season, duck season, rabbit season, duck season.
Exactly. Yeah. So no, I feel you, man. The serpents, and I love that they're serpents too, because that's perfect. Because serpents are the oldest representation that we have of lying characters that entice you into terrible decisions.
Yep.
And it's like, guess what? The two decisions that you have are both told to you by serpents.
Yep.
Which
Parse that one out.
The answer is maybe.
But at the end, it becomes your choice. You can side with either one. It's not that the game's telling you, this other guy wants the world to just slip into the Age of Dark, but, this is, obviously this guy's the right one, so you're gonna do that. You can choose.
The fascinating thing about it is you're not told that this is the right option, or this is the wrong option, or this is the good option, or this is the bad option. It is entirely up to what you believe is good or bad.
We talked about that in Demon Souls, and I think what Demon Souls was trying to sort of contend with was the idea of nihilism, which I feel like Demon Souls is more of a metaphysical thing than Dark Souls is. But Dark Souls is still entirely metaphysical. I think it deals more with entropy though, and sort of the fact of where Demon Souls is human beings having to confront themselves in the world. Dark Souls is more people just having to contend with the world and the reality of things, and Demon Souls is the same way. But I actually think that Dark Souls did that part of it a lot better, because the main characters are sort of the strongest being that is a representation of the age that was ended by the other strongest being that ended it because he believed it was the most right thing to do. And it's like, man, I don't want to get too onto the story of Dark Souls right away, because I'm sure you have a lot of more things that you want to talk about, and that's something we could talk about forever. But the relationship between the Chosen Undead and Gwyn is like, it's like two sides of the same coin. And I think that's also represented in the fact that, you have the original souls. You have the Witch of Izalith, who was the soul of life, Nito, that was the soul of death. And so they're opposites in their own world. But Gwyn and the Furtive Pygmy are opposites in theirs. They're light and dark. And I would actually argue that in a metaphysical sense, Gwyn is supposed to represent a part of humanity, whereas the dark soul and humans are supposed to represent another part. And I think that what that part is the Dark Soul represents sort of the objectivist side of humanity, our rational and logical and objective lives, whereas Gwyn, in his being Zeus and having
Yeah.
and being part of the creation myth and all of that, I think he sort of represents the subjective, the narrative, the god. You know, it's and that's why the entire race of beings that are descendants of the soul of light are called gods, because I think that that's sort of what he's supposed to represent, is what is represented in the idea of God, which is the contention with the more metaphysical aspects of reality. And I think that the clash between the chosen undead and Gwyn is a confrontation between the objectivist reality and the subjectivist reality. The subjectivist reality that begs you to believe continuously in the benevolence of the world, and that you do have purpose, and that you do have meaning in the world, and that there is a place for you. And then the sort of the Enlightenment era Nietzschean nihilism inherent to viewing the world through an objectivist lens, and understanding the concepts of entropy and the concept of evil, and how our lives at the end of them will have no objective meaning. They will simply have subjective meaning to those we leave behind, and having to deal with all those things. And I think that what makes that final clash with Gwyn so emotional is that somewhere deep down you know that, and you know that that's what's going on, and that really both of you are sad beings, because both of you are living in an existence that is defined fundamentally by its suffering. And I think that's what makes Dark Souls very realistic, is that that's sort of a Buddhist principle, but it's a very popular principle in all religions and in all philosophies, is that the fundamental truth of life is suffering. Because some people will deny happiness, but nobody will deny that suffering exists. And you can make the case that pretty much what you're trying to do with your life, no matter who you are, is you're trying to escape or diminish the suffering in your life and in other people's lives. It's one of the things that I always think about, like when people talk about what the meaning of life is. It's like, to me, the easiest way to figure out what your life means is to ask yourself the question, not what do I want, but what do I not want? What do I fear? And then as soon as you know what you fear, you know what you value, because it's the opposite of whatever you fear. And I think that that is what Gwyn was trying to do when he linked the first flame. Was he understood that this cycle was going to happen, that his age was going to end, just like the age of the dragons ended, and that he was going to go the same way, and that everyone that he knew was going to suffer. And he said to himself, well, maybe everybody having to suffer wouldn't be so good, and maybe regardless of the consequences, it would be better if we tried to do something to turn it around, because there's no reason to think that the Age of Dark coming was actually going to be something positive. We saw what happened in Ulasil, and granted, what happened in Ulasil was a result of the primeval man, Manus, being disturbed. And so if that's what happens when it's disturbed, maybe that's just what happens when it's disturbed, and maybe there is a more gentle dark that could come into the world. It's possible, but I think what Gwyn saw was the opportunity to escape the endless cycle of things. And I think that's what people are trying to do with their lives. It's like, we know that we're ensconced in this sort of endless cycle that of death and rebirth, and that inevitably we're going to have to contend with that, and that it's all going to amount to our death. But we might as well do something with it, and that's the meaning orientation. That's the meaning reflex. It's right in our biology, man. And that's what I think Dark Souls is about, and what makes it such a deep and fundamental story and so enriching.
And I think there's something almost beautifully ironic as well about the idea of that what Gwyn's intention was only to find that. I suppose this kind of gets given more context later, but the idea that in trying to break one cycle, Gwyn has created another cycle that has only managed to further destroy all that he was trying to save.
Yes,
And all
exactly.
he has managed to do in trying to prevent the inevitable was make things completely worse for himself and those that he was trying to protect.
I would like to remind everyone this is a game where you beat things up with a stick.
Yes.
Just so we're clear.
And I would say we could talk about that later in the ending of Dark Souls 3's Ring City DLC, because that's very important. But yeah, so I think that the issue with Gwyn is that although he is a moral man that did what obviously he did a lot that was very immoral for sure. You can look at the Pisakas if you want an example of that. But yeah, it's like he knew that he was ensconced in this cycle and that it was inevitably going to end in a lot of pain and suffering. And I think he had every reason to even believe that the dark was not a good thing and that it was probably better off being suppressed. And I think another comparison I would make between the Gwyn and the Chosen Undead, and maybe perhaps the Furtive Pygmy, is the superego, the id, and the ego. Because you have the superego, which its job in your psyche is to judge you, the id, which is sort of where your impulses come from, and then the ego, which is you, which is the force which listens to both sides and then decides. It's the angel and the devil on the shoulder with you in the middle. And so Gwyn is a representation of the superego in that he has judged that that the current existence is probably worth trying to keep, and that whatever this new thing that's going to happen is defined by a lot of really scary things, and that it would probably be best if we could stave it off for as long as possible. And then the Furtive Pygmy and the Chosen Undead sort of represent the id, in that it's like you're just sort of traveling through the world and doing whatever it is at any time that you think is the right thing to do. And it's putting you in all sorts of situations. You're getting through all these circumstances. You're not informed by the grander knowledge of the world. You only know as much as you know. It's and then the ego being the player. The player is the one that has to decide who is right here. And
you have a different thing compared to the character that you play.
And I think there's something really interesting as well about the characterization, and I think I think that lends itself well once you start learning these things as a character and how it connects you to the characters of the story of the game. Taking Gwyn as an example, Gwyn is like, so you see him bringing the end of an age and ushering in a new age, and you see him. And as you learned, as you go on, the cyclical nature and the desperation to keep the age that he created, and you can't help but wonder what things must be like from Gwyn's perspective in the viewing of realizing the end of his age coming, seeing the next age, and I can only think that there's like this moment of dramatic irony that we would have where Gwyn realizes things from the perspective of those that he vanquished, and all of a sudden he's in the dragon's seat, and all of a sudden he's looking at what's coming, and there's this again, this is all something you would have to put in of yourself, is that I like to think of this idea of Jesus Christ, this is what it was like for them, and that fear of this is what it was like for the dragons, and the fear driving the force and the motivation to stop that and never wanting that to happen, leading his motivation into this is how it's going to be. We're going to do everything we can. Fuck this age of darkness.
That's right. That was what I was wanted to get on, was because Gwyn sort of takes that place of the arbiter, the great judge, sort of the god of the world. The issue that you run into when you allow a super ego to run out of control is that it tends to judge of its own creations as being superior to all other. And that's sort of that's the negative side of order, is, order can be good in that it can create structures that that nourish and stabilize people, but it can be terrible in that stabilization and that the desire to make things irrelevant so that only the most useful things can exist can cause you to start making useful things irrelevant to the point where your order becomes stale and rigid and you can't move outside of it. And I think that was the mistake that Gwyn made in trying to extend his age, was believing too much in the goodness of his age and not understanding that he was a part of a world that was characterized by disparity, where there is a balance and there is good and evil to all of it. And if the natural course of the world wants the dark to come, then the dark might need to come.
Yeah. And I think there's an interesting case to be made as well for I think for the inevitability of the coming of that dark age, and the debate of whether or not Gwyn would even realize or consider, or perhaps he doesn't want to admit the fact that the futility of everything that he is doing, and whether or not he genuinely believes that he can stave off this coming of an age eternally, or whether there's some acknowledgement of the inevitability of the fall of what he's doing, despite the havoc that it's wreaking upon the age that he himself has created and deified almost. And you see that as you play the game. You can see the complete depravity and the complete disorder that the world is falling into, and the complete chaos of which it's not some wonderful paradise you're trying to walk through and save. It's a fucking shithole. And everything is crumbling around, and like even to the point where, look at the state that Gwyn has put himself into, all for the sake of preserving what is inevitably going to be lost. He is a shell of what he once was. He is a shell of the being that began this fantastic and this prosperous era, has fallen so great to preserve that which he will never be able to save in the first place.
Yeah, and I think that the analogy of he's a shell of what he once was is the best analogy to make, because what Gwyn was a representation of the world's ability to build itself into something great. And what happened in the end was that he believed so much he got high so much off of his own supply that what he inevitably ended up doing was building something that was so terrible that the world could not have possibly been better off for him having done it. And so the image of Gwyn literally went from something that was godlike and deific and something to be lauded, to something that was just a husk, the image of grandeur, but the face of depravity.
One might even say a hollow.
Yeah. And that's another reason why I say
Yeah.
that Gwyn is another side of of human beings, is because he bears the resemblance of hollowing in the end. And we know that hollowing in universe is a matter of the dark soul, but it's a metaphysical game, man. It's about the images.
You could even argue that that imagery of Gwyn being in that state and going from godlike to having that hollowed state could even be a further emphasis of the idea of the dark soul and the bringing of the dark age being the inevitability that is haunting Gwyn, because it's literally happening to him.
Yes.
He is literally being hollowed.
And this is a world where things like that can manifest themselves physically.
Yeah.
We know that for sure.
One thing I find interesting is the irony that the story that you're told at the beginning of the game is Gwyn changing the world, changing
Gwyn
the
versus
order.
world.
Yeah, he gets rid of the dragons. He changes the face of the world. He brings upon massive change. And then when you get there, all he's trying to do is prevent change.
Yeah.
The human desire that resists change in the real world can be seen in the way that Gwyn acts and how worse he makes it, because he resists that change compared to what might come. Now, sure, the Age of Dark could just absolutely ruin everything, could be entirely worse than the world is now, but he doesn't know that. But he resists that change because of the fear of what might come. And he makes that decision for the entire world, which, he thinks he has the right to do that.
The obsession with change is merely the obsession with structure that exists in your head.
And I think that idea of the obsession of and the fear of things changing, I think, is something that is so fantastically represented, and not just in various places in the game. But look at Anor Londo.
Hmm.
Arnold is like the perfect visage of that terrifying aspect of change, being that it's entirely loaded. It's all a lie.
Yeah.
It is an illusion
It's
made
all an
by Gwendolyn, the god
Yeah.
of illusion.
Mhm.
Because it's all about status and how you appear, right?
Yep.
So yeah, that was a deep dive. And we were just talking about unreliable NPCs. So.
Look, man, I'm telling you right now, I can talk about Dark Souls and the lore and how it connects
Yeah.
to all of these things forever.
Oh,
There's a
I'm
lot of
well aware.
there's a lot of real world history that I think
See,
Dark Souls is
And
really
this is like, and I
thing.
think it's really interesting as well, because obviously this is touching on a lot of stuff from in Dark Souls 1, but the idea of this as well, like these ideas all the way that they carry into 3 as well, and the kind of opposing, well, I mean, obviously without jumping too far ahead, because we're going to talk about 3, like the idea of the you could almost say, like, depending on how you looked at it, depending on what you did in Dark Souls 1, the opposing goals almost of what you're doing in 1 and 3, and
Mhm.
the idea of, so that, you know what, that stuff we'll talk about in 3. I'm wait until we jump into 3, because
There's-
that's gonna start going down a rabbit hole.
There's something that I just remembered that I'd really like to mention that I would like to not really explain too much. I'd just like to say so that you can think about it.
Okay.
You're familiar with the phrase, I believe it was from Beyond Good and Evil. He who fights monsters should take care that he does not himself become a monster.
Mm.
And once you stare into the abyss stares back into you.
Mm-hmm.
Manus
Cough.
is the father of the abyss. He is the primeval human, and he is a monkey.
He's a fucking monkey.
That is covered in eyes.
Ooh.
Which actually has just reminded me about the rabbit hole of lore.
I was about to say, I don't know what a monkey covered in eyes reminded you of, but I probably don't want to know.
Which is also, that quote itself has already just made me think of the bottomless pit of lore that is, well, the abyss of lore that is Artorias.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
The legend Artorias.
Yeah.
Art none but a fabrication. And it is.
Yeah. Artorias did fuck all.
Artorias didn't do shit.
Oz, baby!